Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Explorer. Tonight, we're heading north, way north, to a land stitched together with pines, snowflakes, and gentle silences. Canada, vast and quietly magnificent, is waiting for us. So fluff your pillow, settle in, and let's take a slow and winding journey through its forests, cities, mountains, and lakes, without ever leaving the warmth of your blanket. This isn't a video meant to thrill or startle. It's a soft-spoken story of snow-draped rooftops, loons calling across moonlit lakes, the scent of maple syrup in winter air, and the quiet hum of kindness that seems to settle into Canadian soil like fresh snowfall. We'll wander through cosy towns, whisper through ancient forests, sip warm drinks beside log cabins, and meet the people, stories, and traditions that make Canada feel like a dream painted in white and pine green. Now, I do hope this video isn't too interesting, just interesting enough to leave your mind gently wandering like a snowflake falling through still air. But if it does end up keeping you awake, well, at least you might learn something along the way. Before we begin, if you enjoy these calm, cozy journeys through space, science and culture, I'd be ever so grateful if you could tap the like button and subscribe. It helps this little channel drift its way to more sleepy explorers like you. And if you're feeling sociable, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing how far and wide this little voyage is travelling, so go ahead, take a deep breath. Feel your shoulders drop. Let your eyelids grow a little heavier with each word. There's no rush here, no loud surprises, just a gentle meander through the snow-covered wonderland that is Canada. And one final note before we drift away together. This video is for relaxation and entertainment. It isn't medical advice, nor is it a substitute for professional help. Please consult a healthcare provider if you're experiencing persistent sleep issues. Now let's begin. Canada is big, really big. It's the second largest country in the world, just behind Russia, and yet somehow it feels even bigger than that. Maybe it's the way the sky stretches endlessly above the prairies, or how the forests seem to go on forever, or how the northern tundra disappears into a snowy silence so vast it feels like the edge of the earth. With nearly 10 million square kilometres of land, Canada is less a single place, and more a vast collection of landscapes stitched together with snow, pine needles, and the occasional moose. To the south, it shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. To the north lies the icy Arctic Ocean, where polar bears wander across frozen seas and ancient icebergs drift slowly through cold, silent waters. And then, wrapping around its eastern and western edges like a chilly embrace, are the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, whispering the sounds of waves and winds into Canada's coasts. 3 oceans, one enormous country, and a whole lot of room to breathe. What's astonishing is just how varied the terrain is. Imagine standing on a frozen Arctic plain where the sun barely rises in winter, and then flying south to walk through towering rainforests in British Columbia, green and dripping with moss. Picture crossing wide open prairies in Saskatchewan, where wheat fields sway under endless skies, and then heading east to the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, soft and ancient, rising out of forests that burn red and gold in the fall. In the far north, the tundra stretches out like a blank canvas. Permafrost lies just beneath the surface, locking the ground in an eternal chill. Caribou migrate across this landscape in great herds, and hardy Arctic foxes dart between snowdrifts. This is a land of extremes, where the air can freeze your eyelashes, and the northern lights dance across skies so dark the stars look close enough to touch. Move a little south, and the boreal forest begins. It's one of the largest ecosystems on the planet, a belt of coniferous trees that stretches from coast to coast. Spruce, fir, and pine trees dominate the landscape, standing like silent sentinels in the snow. In autumn, the air smells faintly of wood smoke and damp leaves. In spring, the forests wake slowly, shaking off the frost as birds return and rivers begin to run again. Then come the prairies, wide and golden and open. Saskatchewan and Manitoba roll out like nature's welcome mat, their flatness so complete it feels like you could see the curve of the earth if you squint just right. Here, farming is a way of life, and grain elevators rise on the horizon like lonely towers. In summer, the skies are enormous and alive with storm clouds and sunsets that feel like fire. And then, of course, there are the mountains. The Rockies stretch along the western edge of Alberta and British Columbia, snow-capped and majestic. Jagged peaks rise above alpine lakes, so blue they seem unreal. Banff and Jasper are names that have become almost mythical in the minds of travellers. Places where bears still roam and glaciers still creak under the weight of centuries. Hike a trail here, and you'll find wildflowers poking through snow and waterfalls tumbling down cliffs into valleys hushed with pine. But Canada isn't just about grand landscapes. Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest impression. The air, for instance. It's startlingly fresh. Whether you're standing on a sidewalk in Halifax or a trail in the Yukon, there's a crispness to it. A clarity that makes your lungs feel like they're drinking instead of breathing. And then there's the scent. Sometimes maple, sometimes snow, sometimes just clean air and wood smoke. It's hard to describe, but you'll know it when you feel it. Canadians themselves are often described as kind, and while that might seem like a stereotype, it's one that many wear proudly. There's a quiet friendliness here, a willingness to hold the door a little longer, to smile at strangers, to offer directions even when no one asks. The politeness isn't performative, it's part of the rhythm of life. Apologising seems to be a national pastime, often for things no one did wrong, and there's a certain charm in hearing someone say sorry after you bumped into them. And then there's the coffee, or more specifically, Tim Hortons. You'll find one on almost every corner, and if you don't, just wait a few blocks. This Canadian institution serves up coffee, donuts and breakfast sandwiches with a side of routine. For many, the day doesn't truly begin until they have stood in line for a double-double. A coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars, or picked up a box of Timbits, which are donut holes that somehow vanish the moment you open the box. Ask a Canadian about moose, and you'll likely get a story. These enormous, ungainly creatures are something like the unofficial mascots of the country. Towering over cars and possessing the surprising ability to swim, moose seem like a blend of ancient power and cartoon awkwardness. Seeing one is both thrilling and slightly nerve-wracking, especially when it happens on a road at dawn, their antlers ghosting out of the mist, like something from a dream. One particularly common anecdote goes like this. You're driving down a quiet road, snowflakes tapping gently against the windshield, when traffic slows. There's no accident, no construction, just a moose, casually standing in the middle of the street, blinking slowly, utterly unbothered by the world. It might stay there for minutes, maybe more, before eventually sauntering off as if it had a meeting to attend in the woods. No one honks, everyone just waits. Then there are the little quirks. Milk often comes in bags. That's right, plastic pouches you slide into a jug and snip the corner off. It's a system that confuses visitors and delights locals. Or consider the metric system. Canadians measure distance in kilometres, temperature in Celsius, and yet somehow height often gets discussed in feet and inches. It's a delightful mix of systems that keeps everyone just a little bit on their toes. The cities, too, have their own flavour. Toronto bustles with energy and multicultural vibrancy. Montreal hums with music and French conversation. Vancouver offers ocean views framed by snowy mountains, and Halifax blends seafaring tradition with college town charm. And then there are the smaller towns, the ones with only one traffic light, where everyone knows everyone else's dog by name, and where winters are measured not in weeks, but in shovelfuls of snow. Canada's climate demands a certain resilience. Winter can last for months, stretching its icy fingers across nearly every province and territory. But with it comes a kind of beauty that's hard to find elsewhere. Snow muffles sound, painting the world in soft whites and blues. Trees wear coats of frost. Lakes freeze into mirrors. It's a country that knows how to be still, how to embrace the cold not as an enemy, but as part of the rhythm of life. You might hear phrases like, "It's a dry cold," or "This isn't so bad compared to Winnipeg," and you'll quickly realise that winter is a topic of constant conversation. But there's also pride in surviving it. Children are bundled up in so many layers they can barely move. Adults dig out cars each morning with stoic sighs. And through it all, there's a certain contentment. After all, few things feel quite as satisfying as coming in from the cold and wrapping your hands around a steaming mug of cocoa. And while the weather can be intense, it also brings people together. Whether it's skating on a frozen pond, building snow forts in the backyard, or curling up by the fire after a long day, winter becomes something to celebrate rather than endure. It's a season of slow conversations, hearty meals, and quiet moments, wrapped in scarves and shared stories. For all its size, Canada doesn't shout. It whispers. It invites you in slowly through the crunch of boots on snow, the flicker of northern lights, the smell of pine and campfires, the warmth of a stranger's smile. It's a land where nature is immense, but never overwhelming, where people are quietly proud, never boastful, where every province and territory holds a piece of the puzzle, and every visitor finds something just a little bit magical. Canada's story doesn't begin with explorers planting flags or treaties signed under candlelight. It begins much earlier, with the footfalls of peoples who knew the land not from maps, but from memory, who navigated rivers without compasses, and who told their histories not through ink, but through songs, carvings, and sacred fires. Long before Canada was called Canada, it was home. Home to Indigenous civilizations as complex, diverse, and deeply rooted as the land itself. The First Nations Inuit and Métis are not chapters in a history book. They are the spine. There are over 600 recognised First Nations communities, speaking more than 50 distinct languages, belonging to diverse nations like the Cree, Haida, Mi'kmaq, Dene, and Ojibwe, just to name a few. Each had and still has its own governance, customs, oral traditions, and intricate relationships with the land. These weren't wandering tribes in search of identity. They were skilled traders, hunters, farmers, and knowledge keepers, deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature. Along the Pacific Northwest coast, the Haida and Tlingit built great cedar longhouses and carved towering totem poles. Their societies rich in art and complex social structures. In the plains, buffalo roamed in vast herds, and nations like the Blackfoot and Assiniboine followed their migrations with deep reverence. In the eastern woodlands, the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, formed a sophisticated democratic alliance that would later influence the political thinking of colonial leaders. Meanwhile, the Inuit thrived in the Arctic, mastering the icy terrain with ingenious tools and snowblock architecture that defied the elements. Their knowledge of the land was encyclopedic. They knew when the caribou would cross the river, which bark treated a fever, and how to read the sky like a book. They mapped trails across the tundra using stone markers called Inuksuit, passed down stories that contained both myth and weather prediction, and understood sustainability not as a concept, but as a way of living. To them, land wasn't owned, it was alive, a partner, not a possession. Then across the Atlantic, sails appeared on the horizon. The Norse, or Vikings, arrived around the year 1000, led by Leif Erikson. They briefly settled in what's now Newfoundland, in a place known today as L'Anse aux Meadows. Though their time on North American soil was short-lived, it's still a curious footnote, a whisper of what might have been if they'd stayed longer. Their presence left little impact compared to what came next. Centuries later, in the early 1500s, European ships began arriving in earnest. First the French, then the British. The French explorer Jacques Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River. Lawrence River, and famously misunderstood a local word for village, Kanata, as the name of the entire land. Thus, the name Canada began as a linguistic misfire and somehow stuck. It is a strangely fitting origin for a country that prides itself on gentle humility. As colonisation took root, French settlers established permanent communities in what became New France, centred around modern-day Quebec City and Montreal. Fur trading became the lifeblood of the economy, with voyageurs and coureurs de bois paddling birch bark canoes through dense forests and icy waterways, forming alliances and sometimes tensions with indigenous nations. Beaver pelts were as good as gold, and the rivers were the highways of the time. But the British had their eyes on the prize too. The two colonial powers engaged in a tug-of-war across the continent, culminating in the 7 Years' War. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris handed over control of New France to Britain. Yet even under British rule, the French language, customs, and Catholic faith endured. This created a bilingual legacy that persists to this day. A nation that speaks in two official tongues, and sometimes in charmingly bilingual sentences, like, "Je vais au dep for some milk, eh?" Meanwhile, indigenous peoples were pushed further to the margins. As settlers expanded westward, treaties were signed, often under duress or without full understanding, and traditional lands were carved up. The Métis emerged as a unique culture during this time, born of indigenous and European ancestry, particularly in the Red River region. With their own language, Michif, and a vibrant cultural blend of hunting, music, and Catholic tradition, the Métis would play a pivotal role in shaping Western Canada. Then came a defining moment. In 1867, the British North America Act united 4 provinces, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, into one Dominion of Canada. It was not full independence, but it was a big step. The country would grow, adding provinces and territories over the years, until it stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and eventually to the Arctic. Canada's identity began to take shape during this period, though it was anything but settled. English and French tensions simmered. Indigenous communities were subjected to policies aimed at assimilation, including the devastating residential school system. These schools, often run by religious organisations, sought to erase Indigenous languages and cultures, causing generational trauma that Canada is still reckoning with today. The legacy is deep and painful, but acknowledgement and reconciliation efforts, while ongoing, are crucial steps toward healing. Through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, waves of immigrants arrived, each bringing their own threads to the Canadian tapestry. Ukrainians settled the prairies. Chinese labourers built the railways. Italians, Greeks, Germans, and Jews made neighbourhoods in the cities their own. Canada's population grew not just in number, but in diversity. And slowly, the notion of multiculturalism began to take root, not just as a policy, but as a lived experience. In 1969, Canada officially became a bilingual country under the Official Languages Act. In 1982, the Constitution was patriated and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was introduced, enshrining protections for individual rights and freedoms. That same charter, notably, recognises the rights of Indigenous peoples and affirms Canada's commitment to equality and justice. Canada's global identity has also evolved. Known internationally for its peacekeeping missions, maple syrup, and the occasional apologetic penguin in a cartoon, the country has carved out a reputation for diplomacy and politeness. It's a bit of a cliché, yes, but it's also built on a real history of trying to mediate rather than dominate. Canadian peacekeepers have served in conflicts from Cyprus to Rwanda, often wearing their signature blue berets and quiet resolve. Today, the echoes of the past still resonate. Walk through downtown Ottawa and you'll pass the towering Gothic Revival Parliament buildings, but you may also see Inuktitut syllabics on public signage. Visit Vancouver and enjoy dim sum in Chinatown before hearing the haunting notes of an Indigenous flute played in the park. Attend a hockey game in Montreal, and you might hear the national anthem sung first in French, then English, followed by the roar of fans wearing jerseys bearing names from every corner of the world. The past is present in the names of places. Saskatchewan from Cree, Quebec from Algonquin, Toronto from Mohawk. It's present in the art of the Inuit, the carvings of the Haida, and the powwows held in fields under summer skies. It's in the stories told around kitchen tables, in the recipes passed down, and in the songs sung on cold nights by the fire. Modern Canada continues to grapple with its history. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established in the early 2000s, collected testimony from thousands of residential school survivors. Its 94 calls to action remain a guiding framework for change. The Land Back movement has gained traction as Indigenous communities assert sovereignty over ancestral territories. Efforts to preserve and revitalise Indigenous languages are growing, often led by youth determined to reclaim what was nearly lost. At the same time, Canada's cities are buzzing with new voices. Immigrants from Syria, Nigeria, the Philippines and beyond, each adding colour and flavour to an ever-evolving culture. Street festivals, food markets, music scenes, and art collectives reflect a nation not stuck in history, but informed by it. In many ways, Canadian identity is an ongoing conversation. It's not about melting everyone into one mould, but about holding space for difference. There's room for fiddles and electric guitars, birch bark canoes and city buses, cedar smudge bowls and scented candles. The past doesn't fade, it mingles. Step into a museum in Winnipeg and learn about the Red River Resistance. Visit a community centre in Nunavut where elders teach Inuit youth to sew traditional parkas. Or simply ride a train across the country, watching forests give way to farmland. Mountains rise and fall, and people of all backgrounds greet you with a nod, a smile, and maybe even a warm hello in a language you've never heard before. Canada's walk through time is not a straight line. It's more like a meandering trail through a dense forest, sometimes obscured, sometimes illuminated, always rich with meaning. Each footstep leaves an imprint, each generation adds a layer, and the trail continues, winding into the future with the soft crunch of snow beneath steady boots. To truly understand Canada, you have to listen for its heartbeat, not in the bustling cities or the silent woods, but in the people themselves. The country might be defined by its landscapes, but it's shaped by the rhythms of human life. Shared meals, sidewalk hellos, pick-up hockey games, and neighbours waving from snow-covered porches. This is a land built not only from stone and snow, but from conversation, kindness, and the quiet strength of community. One of the first things you'll notice about Canadian society is just how many cultures are folded into the mix. Canada is one of the most multicultural countries in the world, and not in the we have a few restaurants from different places kind of way, but in the deeply lived, richly layered sense. Over the past 2 centuries, waves of immigration have carried people from nearly every continent to this northern land. Some came seeking refuge, others opportunity, and many simply looking for a new beginning beneath a wide sky and a colder sun. Walk through a neighbourhood in Toronto, and you might hear Tamil, Arabic, Cantonese, French, English, and Spanish, all within a single block. The aromas drifting from the restaurants might range from Ethiopian stews to Polish pierogi to Caribbean jerk chicken. Festivals dot the calendar year-round. Lunar New Year in Vancouver, Diwali in Brampton, Eid in Edmonton, Hanukkah in Montreal, Greek Fest in Ottawa. In many parts of Canada, multiculturalism isn't just policy, it's the flavour of daily life. But before any boats or planes arrived, before the immigration records and customs forms, the land was already deeply human. Indigenous cultures continue to be the foundation of Canadian identity. First Nations, Inuit and Métis traditions vary widely, but a reverence for land, community and ancestral wisdom is a common thread. In many towns and cities, Indigenous ceremonies are once again being held in public spaces. Smudging rituals, powwows, and storytelling circles are no longer tucked away. They're shared proudly, contributing living heritage to the national conversation. The resurgence of Indigenous languages like Anishinaabemowin, Inuktitut, and Dene is part of a broader cultural revival. Young people are learning the words their grandparents were once punished for speaking. Artists are blending traditional designs with modern media. Elders are being honoured as knowledge keepers, bridging generations with stories etched in memory instead of stone. These threads are vital, binding Canada's future to its roots. Then there's the distinct heartbeat of French-speaking Canada. Quebec, with its cobblestone streets, vibrant culture, and melodic language, is a world unto itself. The French-Canadian identity is deeply proud, fiercely protective of its heritage, and incredibly creative. You'll hear French spoken with a Quebecois lilt that rolls differently from Parisian French, earthier, full of idioms and warm humour. And although Quebec is the heartland of French Canada, French speakers can also be found in New Brunswick, Ontario, Manitoba, and beyond, often in tight-knit communities that host festivals, publish newspapers, and keep the language alive with joyful stubbornness. The Quebecois celebrate culture with gusto, through literature, film, music, and food. Order a steamy hot dog from a Montreal snack shack, catch a winter carnival parade in Quebec City, or watch an indie film from a local director, and you'll start to see just how rich the cultural texture really is. There's a strong sense of place here, a pride in difference that doesn't separate so much as it adds flavour to the national dish. Amid all this diversity, a surprisingly unifying trait runs through the Canadian people: politeness. Yes, the stereotype is real. Canadians are polite not because they're always cheerful, but because they genuinely believe in keeping things peaceful and fair. This doesn't mean everyone's soft-spoken or conflict-averse. It just means there's a general preference for patience over posturing. You might hear a polite sorry in a crowded elevator, even if someone else clearly stepped on your foot. This culture of courtesy extends into everyday interactions. Small talk with strangers is normal, especially in line at the grocery store or on the bus. Eye contact is frequent but gentle. People thank bus drivers as they get off. In most neighbourhoods, shoveling your neighbour's driveway without being asked is not just appreciated, it's practically expected. Canadians often form community not through grand gestures, but through rituals of helpfulness. Holding a door a little longer than necessary, pausing at crosswalks, checking in during snowstorms, it all adds up to a feeling of quiet camaraderie. It's the social equivalent of a warm toque and a hot cup of tea. But while kindness may be the unofficial currency of social life, hockey is the universal language. You don't have to understand all the rules or even play the game to recognise how deeply woven it is into the cultural fabric. From toddlers learning to skate on frozen ponds to adults yelling at referees in beer leagues, hockey is less a sport and more a national pastime. It's a point of pride, a source of nostalgia, and, yes, sometimes the cause of spirited debates over who was the greatest of all time. Wayne Gretzky tends to come up in these discussions a lot. In winter, outdoor rinks pop up like mushrooms after rain. Skates are sharpened, gloves are layered, and games begin, some with teams, others with just whoever showed up. Even if you're not on the ice, chances are you're nearby with a thermos, watching, cheering, or at least pretending to understand the score. And while hockey may get the most attention, it shares the cultural spotlight with other winter favourites like curling and figure skating, and with lacrosse, Canada's official summer sport, and a game with deep Indigenous roots. Beyond sports, community is expressed through shared moments, potlucks in community halls, neighbourhood garage sales in spring, snowmen competitions on suburban front lawns, Block parties where someone inevitably brings a banjo. It's a lifestyle built around connection, even when the weather tries its best to keep people indoors. Family life in Canada is as varied as the landscape. Some households span generations under one roof, while others stretch across provinces and keep in touch through weekend Zoom calls. Parents bundle kids into snowsuits that take 10 minutes to zip up. Grandparents slip knitted mittens into coat pockets. Teenagers grumble about early darkness, but secretly enjoy the excuse to stay in and snack. Meal times are flexible, but certain comforts remain constant. A Sunday roast, hot chocolate after a snowball fight, or fresh bannock pulled from the oven. And while the foods might differ, samosas in one home, pierogi in another, macaroni and cheese from a box in yet another, the intent is the same: nourishment, warmth, and shared time. Small-town life adds a different rhythm. In places where everyone knows everyone else's name, and probably their birthday, family tree, and dog's favourite chew toy, life moves a little slower. There might be only one grocery store, one coffee shop, and one school, but there's a richness in routine. You wave to drivers you pass. You leave your boots at the door in someone's home. You know which neighbour bakes the best butter tarts and which one clears their sidewalk before the snow even finishes falling. In these communities, annual events are big deals. Fall fairs with pie contests, winter carnivals with hay rides, Canada Day parades where the floats are made of recycled barn wood and red balloons. It's not about spectacle. It's about showing up, being present, and feeling like you belong. City life, on the other hand, offers a different kind of closeness. Not necessarily in knowing everyone, but in the shared experiences of urban living. Squeezing onto crowded subways. Chasing the same food truck around on lunch breaks. Spending a sunny afternoon in a public park where toddlers wobble on scooters and students nap under trees. There's an intimacy in shared space, even among strangers. And despite the buzz of the cities, people still find ways to slow down. Libraries are well loved and often bustling. Bookstores have cosy reading corners and sometimes resident cats. Coffee shops glow with laptop screens and the scent of cinnamon buns. Art galleries, farmers' markets, indie cinemas. They all offer pockets of calm in the urban sprawl. Even with all this diversity of experience, there's something quietly consistent about Canadian social life. It values balance over bravado, connection over confrontation, and kindness over noise. Whether you're in a snow-covered village in Nunavut or a bustling market in downtown Vancouver, you're likely to find the same basic ingredients. People who care, communities that hold each other up, and a shared understanding that life, like winter, is easier when you face it together. Canada's heartbeat isn't loud, it doesn't race, but it is steady, resilient, and profoundly human. It beats in every neighbourly wave, every friendly hello, every passed puck, every shared plate, and every apology whispered over a minor inconvenience. It beats in the laughter of children building snow forts, the gentle chatter of elders in parks, and the warm silence of people simply being present together. It's not a spectacle, it's a feeling, and once you tune into it, you'll start to hear it everywhere. Canada may be a land of snow-covered forests and polite conversations, but there's a deeper rhythm humming beneath the surface, one that comes from belief, reverence, and the many ways people connect with something greater than themselves. It's not always loud or formal, Sometimes it's a whisper in the pines, a candle in a window, or a quiet moment shared in silence. This is a country where spirituality weaves itself gently through everyday life, rarely demanding attention, but always present if you know where to look. For many Indigenous peoples, spirituality is not a separate part of life. It is life. It's in the land, the sky, the animals, the water, and the stories passed down across generations. The connection between people and the earth isn't metaphorical, it's familial. The land is considered a living relative, something to respect and care for. Mountains are not just geological formations, they're ancestors. Rivers are not simply sources of water, they are beings with memory and voice. Totems, for example, are more than beautiful carvings. In many Indigenous cultures, particularly among coastal nations like the Haida, Tlingit, and Tsimshian, totem poles represent lineage, history, and spiritual meaning. Each figure carved into the pole, be it a bear, eagle, wolf, or frog, has symbolic weight and is connected to clan identity and ancestral heritage. These totems are storytellers, guardians, and bridges between the physical and the spiritual world. Ceremonies like the sweat lodge, the smudge, and the powwow carry immense spiritual significance. A smudging ceremony involves the burning of sacred plants like sage, cedar, or sweetgrass to cleanse the mind and spirit. It's not a show or performance. It's a sacred act of grounding, often done before meetings, in classrooms, or during moments of personal reflection. The smell of burning sage in the air is a reminder that the sacred is never far away. Across the vast Arctic, Inuit spiritual traditions have long centered around respect for nature and the spirits that inhabit it. The concept of Silap Inua, the breath of the universe, reflects a belief in a force that connects all living things. Stories of Tornat, or helping spirits, remind listeners that animals, weather, and human life are all part of a shared balance. Survival in the north is tough, and the wisdom carried in these spiritual traditions is both deeply practical and profoundly moving. While Indigenous spirituality continues to be practiced and revitalized, the landscape of faith in Canada is also shaped by centuries of immigration and cultural evolution. Christianity arrived with European settlers and has been a central thread in Canadian society for generations. Churches of every denomination can be found across the country, from grand cathedrals to tiny chapels nestled in the hills. Protestantism, particularly Anglicanism and United Church traditions, has deep roots, especially in English-speaking provinces. Roman Catholicism, introduced by French colonists, remains especially influential in Quebec, where you'll find old stone basilicas rising from city squares and towns where church bells still mark the passing of hours. Sunday services, baptisms, weddings, and funerals often form the backbone of life's milestones in many communities. Yet, even within Christianity, Canada's version tends to reflect its personality: gentle, community-oriented, and quietly inclusive. In recent decades, many churches have focused more on social justice, outreach, and interfaith dialogue than on dogma. Soup kitchens, refugee sponsorships, and LGBTQ+ affirming congregations have become hallmarks of a faith that evolves with its people. As immigration transformed the country, so too did its spiritual fabric. Islam is now the second largest religion in Canada. Mosques have risen in cities and towns from Halifax to Vancouver, offering places not just for prayer, but for gathering, education, and community support. The call to prayer may not ring out across the rooftops, but it hums quietly within daily life for many families. Sikhism, too, has found deep roots, especially in British Columbia and Ontario. Sikh temples, or gurdwaras, are places of worship where everyone, regardless of faith, is welcome to share in a meal at the langar, a free community kitchen. The emphasis on equality, service, and compassion has made the Sikh community a vibrant part of Canadian society. During natural disasters, it's not uncommon to see gurdwaras offering food and shelter to anyone in need without asking questions. Judaism has long been present in Canada, with Jewish communities contributing richly to culture, politics, and intellectual life. From Toronto's bustling Jewish neighbourhoods to the synagogues of Montreal, the traditions of Sabbath, Passover, and Hanukkah are kept alive not just in homes, but in public life through festivals, concerts, and shared stories. Jewish humour, intellect, and resilience have found a warm home in Canada's multicultural embrace. Buddhism, too, quietly thrives here. With roots brought by immigrants from China, Japan, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka, as well as Western converts drawn to its philosophy, Buddhist temples dot urban and rural areas alike. Some are bright and ornate, filled with incense and golden statues. Others are minimalist, designed for quiet meditation. Whether practicing Zen, Theravada, or Tibetan traditions, many find peace in the stillness Buddhism encourages, a particularly Canadian kind of quiet. Canada is also home to growing Hindu, Jain, Baha'i, pagan, and secular humanist communities. You're just as likely to pass a yoga studio quoting the Bhagavad Gita as you are a Unitarian chapel hosting a poetry night. The country's spiritual tone is one of openness. Even for those who claim no formal religion, now nearly 1/3 of the population, there remains a sense of reverence for moments of silence, acts of kindness, and the mysteries of the universe. Places of worship in Canada range from ornate to humble, traditional to modern. Gothic churches with stained glass windows stand alongside minimalist meditation centres. A Sikh gurdwara might be found next to a Protestant church, with a Buddhist temple just down the street. In many communities, these buildings serve not just as spiritual hubs, but as gathering places during festivals, weddings, community meetings, and times of need. Reflection doesn't always happen inside walls, though. Canada's natural beauty is itself a kind of cathedral. For many, walking through a forest after fresh snowfall, sitting quietly by a lake at dawn, or watching the northern lights flicker across the sky, is as spiritual an experience as any sermon or scripture. Nature invites contemplation. It slows the mind. It asks for gratitude without words. Seasonal rhythms also play a role in Canada's spiritual landscape. Solstice rituals, both ancient and modern, mark the turning points of the year. In the depths of winter, celebrations like Christmas, Hanukkah, and Yule bring light and warmth into the darkest days. In spring, Easter and Nowruz symbolize renewal and rebirth. Fall harvest festivals, from Thanksgiving to Sukkot, honor the fruits of labor and the importance of gathering. Indigenous ceremonies often align with the seasonal cycle, with solstices, equinoxes, and moon phases guiding the timing of rituals and gatherings. The powwow season typically blooms in summer, when the weather allows for outdoor celebration of song, dance, and identity. These aren't just cultural events. They're spiritual renewals rich with colour, meaning, and joy. In some areas, interfaith events have become increasingly common. Spaces where people from different backgrounds come together to share food, prayers, stories, and understanding. It's not about erasing differences, but about celebrating them side by side. A multi-faith potluck might include samosas, kugel, bannock, and butter tarts, all enjoyed under a banner that reads "Welcome." In Canada, belief rarely demands attention. It doesn't shout from rooftops or demand conformity. It moves gently, like snowfall on a quiet morning. It's found in shared meals, silent reflection, small rituals, and the way neighbours care for one another. Belief, here, shapes behaviour not through force, but through example. Whether it's lighting candles on a winter's night, leaving tobacco at the base of a sacred tree, or simply pausing to breathe in the stillness of a forest, spirituality in Canada often takes the form of presence, of being here fully, of listening both to others and to the land. And that perhaps is the quiet thread that connects all these diverse expressions of faith, a shared reverence for each other, for nature, for mystery, for the unseen, the felt, the remembered. In a land as vast as Canada, there is room enough for every path, and for all who walk with care. In Canada, food is more than fuel. It's a warm invitation to sit, share, and slow down. It's the scent of something bubbling on the stove during a snowstorm, the taste of sweetness layered with memory, the sound of laughter echoing off kitchen walls. Across this enormous and diverse country, traditions simmer in pots, sizzle on grills, and stack up in dessert trays. Each dish carrying a story that's been passed along, tweaked slightly, and served with care. Let's start with something that might sound strange if you've never tried it. Poutine. A simple bowl of fries, yes, but topped with fresh cheese curds and steaming hot gravy. At first glance, it seems like a recipe made at midnight by someone who couldn't decide what to eat. But poutine is a source of genuine national affection, especially in Quebec, where it was first concocted in the late 1950s. The cheese curds squeak when you bite them. That's a good sign. And the gravy must be rich, hot, and just the right thickness to cling without overwhelming. It's messy. It's comforting. It's the culinary equivalent of wearing sweatpants on a snow day. Then there's bannock, a bread with roots that stretch far and wide. Though variations exist around the world, in Canada, bannock has a deep connection to Indigenous communities. Traditionally made with flour, water, and fat, and often cooked over open fire or fried in a pan, bannock is versatile, simple, and hearty. You can eat it sweet or savoury, with berries or dipped in stew. For many Indigenous families, bannock is a comfort food, tied to memories of grandmothers at the stove and gatherings that fill rooms with warmth. Butter tarts may seem like humble little pastries, but don't let their appearance fool you. They inspire fierce loyalty and even heated debates. The filling is sweet and gooey, made of butter, sugar, and eggs, often with raisins or pecans, depending on which side of the tart fence you fall on. Some like their centres runny, others prefer a firmer texture. Either way, when you bite into one, you'll understand why these little treats have a permanent spot at bake sales, family dinners, and late-night snack tables across the country. And what about Nanaimo bars? Named after the city of Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, these no-bake dessert bars are layered with a crumbly chocolate coconut base, a creamy custard-flavoured middle, and a glossy chocolate topping. They don't require an oven, just patience and a sweet tooth. Rich and indulgent, they're often cut into small squares, but no one ever stops at just one. Like so many beloved recipes, everyone's grandmother claims to make the best version. French-Canadian cuisine brings its own distinct flavour to the table. Tourtière, for instance, is a savoury meat pie traditionally served during the winter holidays, especially at Christmas and New Year's Eve. The filling varies by region: pork, beef, veal, even wild game, all seasoned with a blend of spices like cinnamon, clove, and allspice. Wrapped in a flaky crust, it's comfort food of the highest order, often accompanied by pickles, ketchup, or a sweet fruit chutney. Then there's pea soup, or soupe aux pois, a thick, warming dish that traces back to early French settlers. Made from dried yellow peas, slow cooked with bits of salt pork or ham, carrots and onions, it's the kind of meal that sticks to your ribs and warms your core. Long winters in Quebec demanded meals that were filling and resourceful, and this soup delivers both. Add a slice of dense bread on the side, and you're ready to face the frost. Maple syrup holds a place in Canadian hearts that borders on reverence. More than just a pancake topping, it's a symbol of the country's seasonal rhythms and its deep ties to the land. Every spring, when the nights are still cold but the days start to warm, sap begins to rise in sugar maple trees. This sap is collected, either by traditional metal buckets or more modern tubing systems, and then boiled down into syrup. It takes about 40 litres of sap to make 1 litre of syrup, a ratio that speaks to both patience and tradition. Sugar shacks, or cabane à sucre, are the places where this transformation happens. And they're not just about the syrup, they're about celebration. Families and friends gather in rustic wooden buildings, often deep in the woods, to eat hearty meals of ham, baked beans, eggs and pancakes, all drizzled with fresh syrup. After the meal, many head outside to pour hot syrup onto snow, where it cools instantly and can be twirled onto sticks like golden taffy. It's sticky, sweet, and wildly fun. But maple syrup isn't just for breakfast. It sneaks into glazes for salmon, sauces for pork, marinades, dressings, and even cocktails. There's maple butter, maple candy, maple sugar, and, for the truly devoted, entire festivals devoted to the syrupy stuff. It's not uncommon for Canadian children to have early memories of dipping fingers into warm maple syrup straight from the pot, eyes wide with delight and mouths hopelessly sticky. Indigenous foods, long before colonisation, were deeply connected to seasonal cycles and local ecosystems. Smoked fish, particularly salmon and trout, was a staple in many regions, especially along the coasts and rivers. Smoking not only preserved the fish, but added a depth of flavour that modern recipes still chase. In the north, Inuit communities relied on dried Arctic char, seal and caribou, often prepared in traditional methods that allowed them to be stored through long winters. Wild berries were another cornerstone of Indigenous diets. Saskatoon berries, highbush cranberries, blueberries, and chokecherries were gathered carefully and used fresh, dried, or mixed into pemmican, a high-energy food made of meat, fat, and berries that could last for months. Today, many Indigenous cooks are reimagining these traditional ingredients in modern kitchens, blending past and present in dishes that tell stories with every bite. Mealtime in Canada isn't always formal, but it often feels sacred. In the depths of winter, there's something magical about sitting down to a warm dinner in a cosy cabin or home. The windows fog up from the cooking heat, slippers shuffle across wooden floors, and the scent of something roasting slowly fills the air. Dinners might be simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, seasonal vegetables, but they're shared. That's what matters most. In many households, the evening meal is when stories are swapped, jokes are shared, and the day is quietly stitched together. It might include traditional dishes passed down through generations, or a new recipe someone found online and wanted to try. The ingredients change, but the ritual remains. Cook, share, laugh, eat, repeat. Even when people gather for potlucks, whether in school gyms, community centres, or backyard barbecues, there's an unspoken rule that food must come from the heart. It doesn't have to be fancy. A tray of lasagna, a dish of curried chickpeas, a batch of blueberry muffins. They all have their place on the table. There's no competition, just appreciation. Canadian food traditions also reflect the country's deep sense of regional identity. On the east coast, you'll find seafood chowders rich with lobster, scallops, and mussels. In Newfoundland, toutons, fried dough pieces served with molasses, are a breakfast favourite. In the prairies, Ukrainian pierogi and cabbage rolls are common family dishes. On the west coast, salmon, sushi, and fusion cuisine rule the scene. And then there are the quirky comfort foods that don't make international headlines but are adored locally. Ketchup chips, beaver tails, flat, fried pastries topped with everything from cinnamon sugar to Nutella. Donair, Halifax answer to shawarma, served with sweet garlic sauce. And craft dinner, yes, the humble boxed macaroni and cheese, is practically a national treasure, eaten with enthusiasm across all age groups. Food trucks and farmers markets have brought even more diversity to the table. You can eat Jamaican patties in Toronto, peo in Calgary, Somali sambusas in Ottawa, and bannock tacos in Vancouver, all without ever stepping onto a plane. Each dish is an offering of culture, a small edible passport stamped with history and care. Through all of this, one thing remains clear. Canadian food isn't just about the ingredients. It's about the people who make it, the land that grows it, and the stories that are stirred in along the way. Whether you're sitting down to a traditional Indigenous feast, nibbling a butter tart on a park bench, or warming your hands around a bowl of tourtière, there's a sense of rootedness, of comfort, of connection. In a country known for its cold winters and polite people, food is the ultimate welcome. It says, "Come in, sit down, there's enough for everyone." And really, what better way to feel at home than that? Canada may be wrapped in snow and stitched with pines, but if you listen carefully, it hums. The music of this country isn't just found on radios or in concert halls. It's in the wind through birch trees, in fiddles echoing through kitchen parties, and in lullabies sung beside wood stoves as frost blooms on the windows. It's a quiet symphony of traditions, voices, and rhythms that reflect the land's vastness and the diversity of its people. Begin far in the north, where the Arctic breathes in silence and song. Among the Inuit, a unique and haunting musical form has been passed down through generations, throat singing. Called katajak, it's traditionally performed by two women, standing close, facing one another, trading sounds back and forth in a vocal dance. The tones are deep, rhythmic, and almost otherworldly, imitating natural sounds like wind, water, animal calls, and breath. One singer leads, the other follows, and together they create a pulse that feels ancient and alive, like the land beneath their feet. It's not only music, it's play, competition, storytelling and connection, all woven into the same breath. Travel southeast and the musical landscape shifts again. In Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, the fiddle is king. With roots in Scottish and Irish traditions brought over by early settlers, Cape Breton fiddle music is fast, joyous and intricate, often paired with foot-tapping accompaniment and spontaneous dancing in kitchens, barns or on wooden porches. There's a sense of celebration in it, a lively defiance of long winters and hard work, a chance to let loose and remember that life is for living. Accompanying the fiddle is a tradition called step dancing, where the feet become percussion instruments in their own right. It's not a formal affair. Any flat floor will do. The fiddler plays, the dancer responds, and the room comes alive with sound. These gatherings, often known as ceilidhs, pronounced céilís, are not about performance, but about participation. You don't need to be good. You just need to be present. Meanwhile, in Quebec, folk tunes ring out in French, sung with passion and often accompanied by spoons played on knees and tables. Traditional Quebecois music draws heavily from French ballads, laced with Celtic influences, and a rhythmic foot-tapping technique known as podarrhythmy. This foot percussion is performed while seated, tapping out complex rhythms that mirror the beat of the music. Add in the accordion, fiddle, and sometimes a jaw harp, and you've got the recipe for an old-fashioned veillée, a lively evening of song, dance and stories, where everyone knows the words, or at least pretends to by the second chorus. The Métis people, with their own distinct culture and musical heritage, bring another unique rhythm to the Canadian soundscape. Métis jigging, a dance style born of both Indigenous and European traditions, is known for its speed, energy and fancy footwork. The Red River Jig, a central piece of Métis musical culture, combines the Scottish reel and French quadrille with Indigenous drumming and dance. When the fiddle starts, feet blur into motion, and the music becomes a declaration of pride and joy. Across the country, from coast to frozen coast, Indigenous drumming and singing continue to form the heartbeat of many communities. Drums are considered sacred, and their steady rhythm is often said to mimic the beat of the earth itself. Songs carry stories, prayers and memories, and whether they are sung in Cree, Ojibwe, Dean, or Inuktitut, they resonate with deep respect for life and land. Canada's musical heritage also lives in the lyrics of its poets turned singers. Leonard Cohen, with his gravel voice and quiet intensity, gave the world songs that felt like whispered secrets. Born in Montreal, he brought a literary elegance to music, weaving together longing, love, and spirituality. His song Hallelujah has been covered by hundreds of artists around the world, but there's something about the original, slow, sparse, aching, that feels like walking alone through snow at night. Then there's Joni Mitchell, raised in Saskatchewan, whose voice once soared like prairie wind, and who painted stories with words and melodies. Her album Blue is often hailed as one of the greatest of all time, not just in Canada, but anywhere. Her music reflects the wide open spaces she grew up in, full of introspection and beauty that sneaks up on you. And who could forget Neil Young, born in Toronto, whose music has drifted from folk to rock to experimental noise, all while maintaining that raw, unmistakable voice. Or Gordon Lightfoot, whose songs like The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald turned Canadian history into haunting ballads. Or Buffy Sainte-Marie, the Cree singer-songwriter, whose voice carries both activism and artistry, and whose influence stretches across decades. Of course, Canadian music isn't all quiet guitars and poetic metaphors. Enter Drake, the Toronto-born artist who became an international superstar with a blend of hip-hop, R&B and pop. His music may pulse with city energy instead of a country stillness, but it's no less part of the national soundscape. Drake put Toronto on the global map in a new way, nicknaming it the Six, and celebrating the city's multiculturalism through sound. Canada's contemporary music scene is as varied as its landscapes. Indie rock, electronic, country, jazz, classical. It's all here. Cities like Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto are bursting with local talent, playing in cosy venues, underground bars, community centres, and festivals. Events like the Winnipeg Folk Festival or the Halifax Pop Explosion bring together artists and fans for days of music under open skies or twinkling lights. And then, of course, there are the anthems. O Canada, sung in both English and French, is one of the most recognisable pieces of music in the country. Originally composed in French in 1880, it wasn't officially adopted as the national anthem until 1980. The English version came later, and both are used today, sometimes sung together in bilingual harmony. Hearing thousands of voices rise in unison at a hockey game, belting out "O Canada" is enough to raise the hair on your arms. It's more than a song, it's a shared breath. But not all Canadian music is loud or public. Much of it lives in quieter moments. The strumming of a guitar at a lakeside campfire, the murmur of a lullaby passed from parent to child, the soft hum of a car radio as snow falls on the highway. Winter ballads, in particular, have a special place. These are the songs that wrap you like a blanket, sung by artists who know what it means to hunker down and wait for spring. Folk singers like Stan Rogers sang of sailors and storms, of longing and resilience. His voice, deep and rich, could fill a room or drift through the cracks of an old wooden cabin. Songs like Northwest Passage and Barrett's Privateers aren't just tunes. They're oral history, melody as memory. In homes from Newfoundland to British Columbia, music is often made, not just played. Someone brings out a fiddle, someone else starts tapping the table, and soon the room is full of rhythm. Lyrics may be forgotten, notes may be missed, but it doesn't matter. Music in Canada is participation more than perfection. Even among the trees, there's music. Birds, wind, water, all making their own kind of harmony. It's no surprise that so many Canadian musicians draw inspiration from nature. The landscape itself seems to sing, if you're quiet enough to hear it. Music festivals, summer road trip playlists, vinyl records in cosy basements, and spontaneous sing-alongs on a dock. All of these moments stitched together to form the broader melody of Canadian life. Whether it's traditional or modern, loud or whispered, music here is an expression of identity, a gesture of welcome, and a source of quiet strength. In a country where winter sometimes feels eternal and distances are long, music becomes a way to stay warm and stay connected. It turns isolation into intimacy. It keeps memory alive. And whether it's a throat song echoing across Arctic snow or a pop hit played through earbuds on a crowded bus, it reminds everyone listening that they are part of something shared, something beautiful and ongoing. Canada's art doesn't just hang on gallery walls, it curls in wood shavings on workshop floors. sits quietly on snowy porches, hums in the hands of knitters, and rises from the land in both stone and story. It's not always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's carved into the edge of a paddle or stitched into the heel of a moccasin. Creativity in Canada often whispers before it sings, and when it does speak up, it does so with a quiet confidence shaped by wilderness, weather, and a deep reverence for place. Start with the brushstrokes of the group of 7. These early 20th century painters are some of the most iconic figures in Canadian art. Inspired by the raw beauty of the wilderness, they ventured into forests, up mountains, and across frozen lakes, lugging their supplies into remote corners of the country to capture landscapes that hadn't yet been filtered through European eyes. Their work, bold and expressive, brought pine trees, stormy skies, and rocky shores to life in swirls of colour and light. Painters like Lauren Harris, A.Y. Jackson, and Emily Carr didn't just paint what they saw, they painted what they felt. Harris's Arctic scenes, with their towering icebergs and otherworldly calm, feel like they belong in a dream. Carr, though not formally part of the group, infused her canvases with the spirit of British Columbia's rainforests and the presence of Indigenous cultures. Their legacy isn't just artistic, it's spiritual. They helped shape a national identity rooted in the wild, the vast, and the elemental. But Canadian art didn't begin with oil paints and easels. Indigenous visual art stretches back thousands of years, rich with symbolism, connection to the land, and generational storytelling. Across regions and nations, styles differ, but what unites them is the sense that art is not separate from life. It's embedded in ceremony, language, and daily practice. On the northwest coast, Haida, Tlingit, and Tsimshian artists are known for their bold, intricate forms. Sweeping ovoids, stylized animals, and symmetrical designs carved into cedar, etched into silver, or painted onto canoes. Totem poles, towering and full of meaning, are perhaps the most recognized symbols of this artistic tradition. But totems are not just decorations. They're family trees, origin stories, and spiritual guides. Each figure tells a part of a clan's history, and each pole, whether standing proudly in a village or resting in a museum, holds the echoes of generations. In the north, Inuit artists work with the materials the land provides: stone, bone, ivory, and hides. Their sculptures are renowned for their detail and vitality. Carvings of polar bears, hunters, birds, and spirits speak of life on the tundra, of survival, and of a deep respect for the animals that share the landscape. Some are smooth and abstract, others finely detailed, showing movement and emotion in stone so well it feels like the figures might exhale at any moment. Inuit printmaking, too, has flourished since the mid-20th century, particularly in communities like Cape Dorset, now known as Kingate. Artists there produce lithographs, stone cuts, and stencil works that merge traditional imagery with bold, modern composition. The prints often feature mythical beings, animals, and scenes from Arctic life, rendered in a style that's both contemporary and timeless. Across Canada, Indigenous beadwork is both personal and political. Delicate glass beads sewn into patterns that carry meaning far beyond their sparkle. Flowers, stars, thunderbirds, and abstract designs are embroidered onto moccasins, mittens, jackets, and regalia. Every stitch is an act of creation, and often of reclamation. Beadwork tells stories of survival, identity, and beauty that resists erasure. In rural towns and small studios tucked into forests or perched near lakes, artists work quietly. There's a certain solitude in Canadian art, not lonely but contemplative. Painters captured a slant of winter light on barns. Photographers find poetry in the patterns of frost on windows. Potters turn clay from their own backyards into mugs that fit just right in your hands. Some of the most heartfelt creativity comes not from big-name artists, but from everyday people making things with love. Quilts stitched with care, each patch a memory. Sweaters knit over long winters, their patterns passed down through generations. Painted saw blades hung on cabin walls. Driftwood sculptures assembled on beaches. Even ice sculptures at winter festivals, ephemeral, glowing briefly under the stars, a part of this quiet celebration of creativity. Architecture, too, tells a story. The earliest homes were log cabins and longhouses, made with what the land offered and shaped to withstand the climate. Many Indigenous communities built semi-subterranean homes, known as karmat or pit houses, insulated with earth and warmth. These were designs of necessity, yes, but also of genius, shaped by generations of observation and adaptation. French settlers brought their own style, steep roofs and thick stone walls to shed snow and hold heat. In Quebec, some old homes still bear these traditional touches, their wood-burning stoves still crackling on cold mornings. In contrast, English settlers built Victorian houses with gables and gingerbread trim, many of which still stand today, lovingly restored in small towns. Fast forward to modern cities, and Canada's architectural voice has grown sleek and vertical. Glass skyscrapers in Toronto reflect the shifting sky. Vancouver's skyline rises gently against mountains and sea, blending glass towers with eco-friendly design. Montreal is a mosaic of eras, stone facades from the 17th century standing beside bold concrete structures from the 60s, each one adding a note to the city's architectural symphony. Public art fills these urban spaces with colour and meaning. Murals bloom on brick walls. Sculptures stand in parks and plazas. In Winnipeg, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights is itself a piece of art, all sharp angles and glowing glass. In Ottawa, the National Gallery hosts not only Canadian masterpieces, but a giant spider sculpture named Maman that looms outside like something from a gentle nightmare. Canada's artistic soul has always been about more than technique. It's about intention, about crafting something that feels true, whether it's a totem pole carved with a grandmother's story, or a piece of jewellery made from found metal and beach glass. Art here often carries with it a deep sense of place. It remembers. It honours. It dreams. Knitting is one of the most quietly beloved crafts in the country. A practical necessity turned cosy tradition, knitting in Canada is both art and function. Scarves, mittens, toques, and socks are passed down like heirlooms. Knitters gather in cafes, libraries, and living rooms, sharing patterns, stories, and cups of tea. Each stitch is a small defiance against the cold. Each row, a rhythm of care. Moccasins, another treasured craft, combine utility and beauty. Made from soft leather and often decorated with intricate beadwork or quill designs, they are deeply connected to Indigenous tradition. More than footwear, they are expressions of identity and skill, passed from maker to wearer with quiet pride. Craft fairs and local art markets dot the Canadian calendar, especially in autumn and in the lead up to the holidays. You'll find hand-turned wooden bowls, watercolour paintings of local landscapes, woven baskets, handmade soaps, and pottery that still carries the warmth of the kiln. These are places where creativity meets community, where artists sell their wares not for fortune, but for the joy of sharing something handmade. In libraries and schools, children draw loons and paint maple leaves, learning early that art is not just decoration, it's a way of understanding the world. In high schools, plays are staged, often with cardboard props and borrowed costumes, but always with heart. In universities, students experiment with film, sculpture, digital art, blending technology with imagination. And while big-name galleries get much of the attention, many of Canada's most powerful artistic expressions come from small places. A shack turned studio on a windswept island. A basement corner turned into a beadwork haven. A kitchen table where sketches share space with supper. The scale doesn't matter. The spirit does. Creativity in Canada often wears wall socks and drinks from chipped mugs. It doesn't need a spotlight to feel real. It grows from the land and the people. Slowly, steadily, beautifully. It tells stories not only of who Canadians are, but of who they've been and who they're still becoming. Whether it's in the carved curve of a totem, the swirl of paint on canvas, or the patient knit of a scarf, the message is the same. This is a country that values quiet beauty and the hands that shape it. Canada may be vast and filled with snow, but it's also filled with stories. They rise like steam from mugs of tea, drift from library shelves, and linger in the hush between sentences. In this country, storytelling is as much a part of the landscape as mountains and lakes. It winds through cabins in winter, murmurs across campfires, and gets folded into family dinners alongside second helpings of mashed potatoes. Some stories are written, some are sung, and some are simply remembered, passed from one set of hands to the next, like warm quilts on cold nights. To speak of Canadian literature is to begin with some heavy hitters, writers whose names have found homes on bookshelves all around the world. Margaret Atwood, for instance, is more than an author. She's a literary force. Known for her sharp wit, poetic language, and fiercely intelligent prose, Atwood has tackled everything from dystopian futures to environmental collapse, from ancient myths to modern anxieties. The Handmaid's Tale, perhaps her most famous work, is a global touchstone, but her catalogue runs deep, filled with novels, poetry, and essays that explore identity, power, gender, and memory. Alice Munro, another titan of Canadian letters, does something altogether different. Her stories rarely leave small towns or domestic settings, but within those quiet spaces, she reveals entire worlds. Winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, Munro is often called the master of the short story. Her prose is deceptively simple, like a still lake with depth beneath. She captures the subtle turns of a relationship, the ache of growing old, the quiet rebellions of ordinary people. Her writing doesn't shout, it listens. Then there's Thomas King, who blends humour, satire, and a deep understanding of Indigenous history into fiction that is moving as it is biting. King, of Cherokee and Greek descent, is a storyteller in the truest sense, someone who invites the reader in with a smile, then quietly rearranges the furniture of your understanding. His novel, Green Grass, Running Water, plays with myth and modernity, blending traditional Indigenous storytelling techniques with Western literary forms in a way that is both joyful and razor-sharp. But long before these authors picked up pens, stories were already being told across the land. Indigenous oral traditions form the oldest literary landscape in what we now call Canada. These stories were never written down, yet they lived, carried from a mouth to ear, from elder to child, across centuries. They explained the stars, the seasons, the animals, and the origins of people. They held lessons, humour, warnings, and wonder. Creation myths, in particular, reflect the sacred relationship between people and the earth. In many Indigenous nations, the world was sung or spoken into being. The Anishinaabe tell of Nanabojo, the trickster hero who helped shape the land. The Haudenosaunee speak of Sky Woman, who fell from the sky and landed on the back of a turtle, giving rise to what we now call Turtle Island. The Inuit share stories of Sedna, the sea goddess, who lives at the bottom of the ocean and controls the animals of the hunt. These are not fairy tales. They are frameworks connecting the spiritual to the physical, the past to the present. Storytelling in these traditions is a communal act. It happens in circles, around fires, in longhouses or at kitchen tables. The storyteller is not simply a performer. They're a bridge, holding both history and possibility. And though many of these stories are now being written down, their essence remains oral, alive, and rooted in voice. French-Canadian literature and song form another vibrant current in the national narrative. Quebec has given the world its own literary greats. Writers like Gabrielle Roy, whose novel The Tin Flute offered a tender and unflinching look at life in wartime Montreal, and Michel Tremblay, whose plays and novels captured the working-class spirit of Quebec in its own dialect and rhythm. Poetry runs thick through French-Canadian veins. Poets like Émile Nelligan and Gaston Miron gave language to longing and identity. Their verses are filled with emotion, nature, and national soul-searching. Meanwhile, songwriters like Félix Leclerc and Gilles Vigneault turned chanson into something powerful. Songs of place, love, and cultural pride that are still sung today. Music and literature blur often in Quebec. Lyrics become poetry, and poetry becomes the voice of a people determined to keep their language alive. Across the country, local libraries stand like quiet guardians of these stories. In big cities, they stretch across glass buildings filled with light. In small towns, they might occupy just a single room, tucked between a post office and a coffee shop. But they all serve the same purpose: to make stories accessible, to keep curiosity burning, and to provide a soft chair for anyone who needs a moment to sit with a book and forget the world. There's a particular magic in Canadian libraries. Maybe it's the contrast, the warmth of a well-loved library against a snowy street, or the way children's laughter echoes between the stacks. Many offer more than books, craft nights, author talks, language classes, movie rentals, even snowshoe borrowing in some northern branches. They're spaces where people gather not out of obligation, but out of love for stories. Reading in Canada often has a certain coziness to it. In winter, with the snow piling up outside and darkness falling before supper, there's nothing quite like curling up with a book beside a fire, or a space heater, or under an electric blanket. Cabins in particular seem to encourage literary indulgence. With no Wi-Fi, no signal, and nothing to do but read and watch the snowfall, you might finally finish that novel that's been sitting on your shelf for years. Many families have reading rituals passed through generations. A bedtime story every night. A worn copy of a classic novel passed between siblings. A summer afternoon spent rereading a favourite mystery under a tree. Even those who don't consider themselves readers often have a soft spot for a certain book, one that arrived at just the right time or offered just the right words. And then there are the storytellers you won't find in bookstores. The grandparents who spin tales from their childhood, sometimes a little embellished, sometimes a little invented, but always worth hearing. The uncle who tells the same fishing story every Thanksgiving and somehow adds a new detail each year. The aunt who insists that their family's history goes back to royalty, or pirates, or both. These stories don't get published, but they're no less precious. In many Indigenous families, storytelling is still practiced as a form of teaching. Elders share lessons through parables, humour, and metaphor. A tale about a clever raven or a foolish coyote may be funny on the surface, but carry deep meaning about behaviour, responsibility, or respect. These stories are flexible, meant to be shaped to fit the audience, the moment, and the teller's own experience. They breathe. Canadian literature today is as diverse as its population. New voices are rising. Immigrant writers, queer authors, young storytellers of every background. They are writing novels, comics, poetry, memoirs, and hybrid forms that defy easy labels. They are telling stories of arrival, loss, discovery, identity, and love. They are expanding what Canadian literature means, one sentence at a time. Bookstores often feel like little havens. In cities, you might find them tucked under apartments or beside coffee shops. In rural towns, they might double as gift stores or post offices. They stock the classics, yes, but also local authors, handmade bookmarks, and perhaps a community board announcing an open mic night. Some stores let dogs wander the aisles, others serve tea. All of them smell like paper and possibility. There's a saying that Canada is a country with too much geography and not enough history. That's never quite been true. The history is there. It's just told in thousands of voices, over thousands of years. You hear it in the drum beats of a powwow, in the rustle of pages turning in a library, in a poem read aloud at an open mic on a rainy evening. You hear it in the whispered, "Read this, it's so good," between friends. Stories are how Canadians understand themselves, how they remember, how they dream. Whether written in English, French, Inuktitut, Cree, or any of the dozens of other languages spoken here, stories are what connect people across distance, generation, and culture. They're how a grandmother in Nunavut and a teenager in Toronto might both find comfort in the same story, told in very different ways. And perhaps that's what makes Canada's literary soul so rich. It isn't confined to the page. It lives in the voices, the songs, the silences, and the laughter that follows a well-told tale. Whether it's a novel that changed your life or a bedtime story you've heard 100 times, the words become part of you. And in Canada, there's always room for one more story by the fire. If Canada has a national mood, it might just be playfully competitive, but politely so. Even in sub-zero temperatures, there's an energy that buzzes beneath all those layers of flannel and fleece. This is a country that doesn't let snow slow it down. It just puts on skates or snowshoes and turns the cold into a playground. Sport in Canada aren't just pastimes. They're cultural rituals stitched into daily life, holiday traditions, and even the metaphors people use to describe, well, just about anything. Let's start with ice hockey. It's more than a sport here. It's a kind of collective heartbeat. Even people who don't play, or even watch regularly, still seem to know which teams are doing well, which players are local legends, and how to make a decent small talk comment about the Leafs, the Habs, or the Oilers. Children grow up learning to balance on skates before they're steady on bicycles. Backyard rinks are flooded and frozen with the care of a sacred tradition. Plastic pucks thump against garage doors. And if there's a pond nearby, chances are there's a game being played on it before the sun is fully up. Professional hockey, especially the National Hockey League, hold a central place in the national imagination. There's a near mythical reverence for players like Wayne Gretzky, affectionately known as the Great One, whose records and elegance on the ice are still discussed with a kind of hushed awe. There's Sidney Crosby, whose golden goal during the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver brought an entire nation to its feet, shouting with joy into the cold February air. That moment was not just a win, it was a story passed down instantly into the Canadian Folklore Hall of Fame. But the love for hockey goes far beyond the big arenas. In small towns and rural communities, local rinks are community hubs, filled with families bundled in blankets, sipping hot chocolate from paper cups while their kids crash into the boards or score their very first goal. The Zamboni gets almost as much attention as the players. There's a deep affection for the rhythm of the game, the skate scrape of turns, the clack of sticks, the satisfying thunk when the puck hits the back of the net. It's part ballet, part brawl, all heart. Interestingly, Canada's official summer sport isn't hockey, it's lacrosse. Rooted in Indigenous tradition, lacrosse is one of the oldest organised sports in North America. The Haudenosaunee people, among others, have played it for centuries. Originally known as the Creator's Game, it was not just for recreation but for healing, ceremony and preparation for war. Games could last days, with hundreds of players and goals set miles apart. Today, it's played on fields and in indoor arenas, fast-paced and full of strategy, with players wielding sticks that seem equal parts weapon and wand. Lacrosse still carries its original energy. It's fierce, beautiful, and completely exhilarating to watch when played well. In many communities, especially in Ontario and British Columbia, youth leagues thrive, and national championships are celebrated with pride. The respect for its Indigenous roots is growing too, with more teams and schools teaching not just how to play, but where the game comes from and what it means. Of course, not all Canadian sports involve goals and referees. Some are more about rhythm, balance, and enduring the elements with grace, or at the very least with a sense of humour. Curling, for example, is a quintessentially Canadian experience. Played on a long sheet of ice, the goal is to slide polished granite stones into a target area called the house, while teammates sweep the ice ahead of the stone to control its speed and direction. It may sound odd on paper, sweeping ice while yelling instructions like, "hurry hard," but curling is beloved for its mix of precision, teamwork, and friendly competition. In rural towns, curling clubs often double as community centres, with bonspiels, tournaments, that feel more like family reunions than high-stakes contests. There's beer, laughter, sportsmanship, and a good deal of friendly ribbing. It's the kind of sport where you can be extremely serious and completely laid back at the same time. Then there's pond skating, which is less of a sport and more of a rite of passage. When the temperature dips and the lakes and ponds freeze over, people lace up their skates and head outside. No boards, no referees, no scoreboard, just the hiss of blades on ice, breath in the air, and the occasional snowball lobbed from the sidelines. It's peaceful and pure, often accompanied by a thermos of something warm and a view of snow-covered trees reflected on glassy ice. Some skaters bring hockey sticks. Others bring nothing at all and just glide in lazy circles, wrapped in scarves and winter quiet. Snowshoeing, too, turns winter into an invitation. Once a survival necessity for navigating deep snow, snowshoes have evolved into sleek, lightweight tools for winter exploration. Strapping them on feels like stepping into history. You can suddenly walk atop snowbanks that would otherwise swallow you whole. Whether on a trail through a national park or just tromping across a frozen meadow, snowshoeing offers a chance to hear nothing but your own footsteps and the distant call of a raven. Canada has also produced its share of Olympic legends, athletes whose grace and grit have captured the nation's attention, even if only for a few sparkling days every few years. Figure skaters like Tessa Virtue and Scott Moir, whose ice dance routines combine technical brilliance with undeniable chemistry, brought home gold and the admiration of millions. Sprinter Donovan Bailey, skier Nancy Green, freestyle skier Alexandre Bilodeau. The list of medalists is long, and each one brings a story of perseverance, chilly training mornings, and immense national pride. But perhaps the most Canadian thing about the country's love for sports is how humble it all feels. Sure, there are big games and bright lights, but there are also sleepy sports towns where the local arena lights glow softly at night, and where posters of high school teams hang proudly in gas stations. Kids grow up wearing jerseys with taped-on numbers. Coaches are often parents, uncles, or the neighbour who always shows up early to shovel the ice. Winning is nice, but showing up, playing fair, and shaking hands afterward is better. There's a sense that play matters, not because of trophies, but because of what it brings out in people. Joy, resilience, teamwork, and the occasional very good excuse to wear ridiculous outfits in public. Consider the curling uniform of neon pants, or the hockey fan covered head to toe in body paint in the dead of winter. Canadians are not above a little silliness when it comes to sport. Even outside of organised play, the Canadian landscape invites a kind of spontaneous, joyful movement. Tobogganing down icy hills, building snow forts in the backyard, or staging snowball fights with all the drama and strategy of a major military operation. These things are just part of growing up in the north. Some of the most iconic winter memories involve getting so bundled up you can barely move, only to come home with snow in your boots and frozen cheeks, laughing all the way. And then there's the moose. The moose has become a kind of unofficial mascot of Canadian playfulness. Enormous, majestic, slightly goofy looking, and often wandering into human spaces with a kind of blasé confidence, the moose pops up in cartoons, sports logos, and an entire collection of charming metaphors. Someone who is a bit clumsy might be called as graceful as a moose on a dance floor. A snowstorm that comes out of nowhere might be blamed on a moose sneezing in the north. It's all good fun. A little wink at the wilderness that lives just beyond the edge of the town. Whether sliding across ice, running across fields, or simply throwing snowballs at a sibling who really should have seen it coming, Canadians find ways to play that are shaped by their environment and their outlook. There's pride in competition, but also deep affection for the moments in between. the shared joke on the bench, the lopsided snowman beside the rink, the way everyone pauses to admire the northern lights before returning to their game. The playful spirit isn't about winning, it's about joining in. It's about motion, laughter, effort, and connection. In a country that stretches from sea to sea to sea, and where winter takes up more than its fair share of the calendar, finding ways to move, to play, and to celebrate the joy of activity isn't just tradition, it's survival. But more than that, it's happiness. It's childhood remembered, friendships forged, and a national character that knows how to keep its mittens on and its heart wide open. In Canada, celebrations tend to sneak up quietly and then bloom into something wonderful, like a campfire suddenly flaring up in the cold night, or a small town lighting up with lanterns and laughter. The country may have a reputation for modesty, but that doesn't mean it doesn't know how to throw a good party. From coast to coast, and all the snowy ground in between, festivals and feasts mark the calendar with warmth, flavour, and just the right amount of spectacle. At the top of the list is Canada Day. Held every year on the 1st of July, it marks the anniversary of Confederation in 1867, the moment when Canada officially became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. These days it's less about paperwork and more about fireworks, music, and that unmistakable scent of grilled hot dogs floating over public parks. Cities host concerts, families gather for barbecues, and people everywhere don red and white like it's the official uniform of summer. In Ottawa, Canada's capital, thousands gather on Parliament Hill for an all-day celebration featuring performances by Canadian musicians, air shows from the Royal Canadian Air Force, and fireworks that light up the skyline. But just as meaningful are the smaller gatherings: backyard parties in Saskatoon, pancake breakfasts in Halifax, canoe flotillas in Whitehorse. Whether it's in a bustling city square or on a lakeshore with a campfire crackling nearby, Canada Day is a time for togetherness, reflection, and more than a few maple leaf face tattoos. When winter sets in, and it really truly sets in, Canada doesn't hibernate. Instead, it lights things up. Winterlude, held each February in Ottawa and Gatineau, is one of the country's biggest and most beloved winter festivals. For a few weeks, the frozen Rideau Canal becomes the world's largest skating rink, stretching nearly 8 kilometres through the city. Skaters of all ages glide past snow-covered banks, warming up with cups of hot chocolate and maple taffy on a stick. Massive snow and ice sculptures line the streets, each one more elaborate than the last. Castles, creatures, even entire miniature villages carved in frosty detail. There are concerts, parades, and a general atmosphere of, yes, it's cold, but look how magical cold can be. For children, the giant snow slides are the highlight. For adults, the steaming bowls of poutine and the thought of sitting next to a fire pit while snowflakes drift down like confetti are pretty hard to beat. In Indigenous communities across the country, powwows form an entirely different and deeply meaningful kind of festival. These are gatherings of culture, tradition, music, and dance, events that honour history, spirituality, and community all at once. Powwows often begin with a grand entry, where dancers in full regalia, feathers, beads, embroidery, enter the circle to the steady rhythm of drums. Each beat of the drum is said to represent the heartbeat of Mother Earth. There are traditional dances, competitive dances, and intertribal dances where everyone is welcome to join. Vendors sell handcrafted jewellery, beaded art, and fry bread. Storytellers share oral histories. Elders are honoured, and everywhere there is a sense of resilience and pride, a celebration of survival, beauty, and identity. Powwows may follow ancient traditions, but they're also alive, evolving, and welcoming, an invitation to learn and to share. As the seasons turn, harvest festivals take centre stage. Fall in Canada is a patchwork of changing leaves, crisp air, and fields bursting with pumpkins, apples, and late-season vegetables. Many communities host local harvest celebrations where farmers set up stalls under bunting flags and kids run through corn mazes. There's fresh apple cider to sip, homemade jams to sample, and pies that always seem to disappear too quickly. Thanksgiving in Canada comes earlier than in the United States, usually falling on the second Monday of October. Rooted in both European harvest traditions and Indigenous celebrations of the land's abundance, Canadian Thanksgiving is a quieter affair. Families gather, tables are filled with turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and vegetables that taste even better when you know they came from someone's backyard garden. Wild game also plays a role in many traditional feasts, especially in northern and rural communities. Moose stew, venison sausage, and roasted duck appear alongside bannock, wild rice, and berry preserves. It's a time for gratitude, not just for food, but for connection, for warmth, and for the chance to pause before winter wraps everything in white. As the days grow shorter and colder, towns and cities across Canada start to glow. Christmas parades, often held in late November or early December, bring out entire communities. Some are grand, with floats, marching bands, and appearances by Santa Claus. Others are small, but no less charming. Pickup trucks strung with lights, kids tossing candy canes, and snowplows transformed into festive sleighs. One of the most beloved holiday traditions in many areas is the Festival of Lights. From Vancouver to Charlottetown, people decorate their homes with strands of twinkling lights, creating entire neighbourhoods that look like someone sprinkled stardust over the rooftops. Public parks are transformed into glowing wonderlands, complete with hot cider stands, choir performances, and the occasional appearance of a well-insulated reindeer. Food, of course, continues to play a central role in every celebration. Tourtière, the French-Canadian meat pie, is a staple on many holiday tables. Butter tarts make frequent appearances, as do shortbread cookies, Nanaimo bars, and gingerbread houses that somehow never make it to New Year's Eve intact. In some communities, families hold open houses. Everyone is welcome to drop by, share a snack, and enjoy a little holiday cheer, often while snow boots pile up by the door. Fireworks are not just a summer event. In Canada, they light up the night sky in winter too, bursting above frozen lakes, reflecting off snow-covered rooftops, and making children squeal with delight despite the icy air. On New Year's Eve, many towns host outdoor celebrations where crowds gather, bundled to the nose, sipping warm drinks and watching the sky come alive in bright, cold bursts of colour. Smaller festivals often hold just as much magic. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the George Street Festival celebrates local music with 7 nights of dancing and celebration in the heart of St. John's. In Yukon, the Available Light Film Festival brings stories to life during the darkest days of the year. In Prince Edward Island, the Fall Flavours Festival turns the island's culinary talents into a month-long feast. And in almost every province, there's at least one festival where you can watch chainsaw artists carve masterpieces out of logs, because apparently that's just a thing Canadians are very good at. Rural communities have a special knack for turning the simple into the spectacular. A winter carnival in a small town might include sled races, maple taffy, snow sculpture contests, and impromptu snowball fights that seem to draw in every child within a 5-kilometre radius. School gyms are transformed into dance halls. Community centres host chili cook-offs and bake sales. There's usually a raffle, a fiddler, and someone's uncle dressed as a very convincing Santa. Even when the temperature drops well below freezing, Canadians find reasons to gather. The joy isn't in extravagance, it's in togetherness. It's in standing shoulder to shoulder at the edge of a snowy field, watching fireworks burst overhead, your mittens soaked but your spirit warm. It's in the clatter of dishes after a big meal, the flicker of candles in a window, the quiet murmur of conversation over pie. Celebrations here don't need to be loud to be meaningful. They often unfold with the same steady rhythm as the seasons, marking moments, honouring tradition, and making space for joy, even in the chill of winter or the bustle of harvest. Whether it's a national holiday or a potluck in a church basement, each festival and feast carries with it the unmistakable Canadian touch, a mix of humility, heart, and just enough maple syrup to make everything better. And perhaps that's the essence of celebration in Canada. It's not about flash, it's about feeling. It's about coming in from the cold, setting down a dish, pulling up a chair, and being part of something shared. Whether it's your first festival or your 50th, the warmth of Canadian hospitality will always leave room at the table. Canada is often thought of as a land of snow and silence, but listen a little more closely and you'll find it sings with life. This is a country where vast forests stretch for thousands of kilometres, where mountains cradle secret alpine blooms, and where the air carries the calls of loons, the rustle of spruce boughs, and the distant snap of antlers moving through the mist. It's a place where wildlife and wildflowers shape the identity of the land just as much as cities and stories. Let's begin with the moose, a creature so distinctly Canadian it might as well appear on the flag beside the maple leaf. Towering and oddly majestic, moose are the largest members of the deer family. Adult males can weigh over 600 kilograms and sport antlers that spread wider than your average dining room table. Despite their size, they move with a surprising grace through the forests and wetlands they call home. Spotting one in the wild is like stumbling upon a forest spirit, mildly dishevelled, slightly confused, but absolutely magnificent. They wander with long legs through marshes and snowy woods, often alone, occasionally in pairs, and almost always looking like they've just remembered something important. They're iconic not just for their size, but for their place in folklore, postcards, and roadside moose crossing signs. And yes, they have a reputation for appearing suddenly in inconvenient places, like the middle of highways or the centre of small-town downtowns, bringing traffic to a polite and amused standstill. Then there are the bears, black bears roaming the forests, grizzlies stalking salmon streams in the west, and polar bears ambling across the icy reaches of the north. Canada is home to 2/3 of the world's polar bear population, many of them concentrated in Manitoba near the town of Churchill. In fact, Churchill is sometimes called the polar bear capital of the world, and it's not unheard of for the local government to issue bear warnings the way other towns might talk about heavy traffic, or a water main break. Black bears are more widespread, often sighted ambling through wooded areas or poking around berry patches. While generally shy, they can be curious, and they have an uncanny knack for sniffing out unattended picnic baskets. Grizzlies, with their massive shoulder humps and powerful presence, are more reclusive, but their territories stretch across parts of British Columbia, Alberta, and the Yukon. Seeing one in the wild is an unforgettable, humbling experience, best enjoyed from a very respectful distance. Wolves add mystery to the northern forests. These elusive social animals are symbols of wilderness and resilience. Their howls drifting through the trees at dusk are the soundtrack of the untamed. Packs roam across parts of Ontario, Quebec, and Western Canada, communicating with each other over vast distances. Wolves are cautious of humans, but traces of their presence, tracks in fresh snow, distant howls, remind hikers and wanderers that they are never quite alone in the woods. And then there's the beaver. Canada's national animal may not have the grace of a wolf or the stature of a moose, but it has something uniquely Canadian about it. Determination, resourcefulness, and a preference for quiet productivity. Beavers are the engineers of the wilderness, building dams and lodges from sticks, mud, and sheer willpower. Their flat tails slapped water in warning, their teeth never stop growing, and their industrious spirit is woven into the Canadian national identity. Along lakes and rivers, you'll often hear the echoing call of the loon. This bird, with its black and white speckled plumage and haunting cry, is a favourite among cottage goers and wildlife enthusiasts. Their wail is often described as ghostly or eerie, but to many Canadians, it's the sound of summer, of quiet mornings on the dock and evenings spent listening to the stillness echo across the water. Venture to the coasts and the creatures change. In the Pacific, orcas glide through deep fjords and along rocky shorelines. These intelligent, social whales are often seen in pods, their black fins cutting through the sea like sails. Watching them breach is like witnessing a seaborne ballet, elegant, powerful, and utterly spellbinding. On the Atlantic coast, puffins nest in rocky cliffs, their colourful beaks making them look like feathered jesters. These tiny seabirds flap through the air in a way that seems to defy physics and common sense, but they're expert divers and dot the summer skies in Newfoundland like confetti with wings. In the Arctic, caribou wander the tundra in large, elegant herds. Both males and females grow antlers, and their migrations are among the longest of any terrestrial mammal. In some indigenous cultures, caribou are not just important food sources. They're considered relatives, integral to traditional ways of life and spiritual practice. Their hooves click as they walk, a soft rhythm against the open silence of the north. And peering silently from snow-covered branches, the snowy owl surveys its world. These striking birds, with their golden eyes and pure white feathers, seem plucked straight from the pages of a fantasy novel. Unlike most owls, snowy owls are diurnal. They hunt during the day, often from perches or by soaring low over open fields and tundra. They are well adapted to the cold and bring an otherworldly presence to the northern skies. The habitats that support all these creatures are as varied as the animals themselves. Canada's boreal forest stretches like a green belt across the country, from Newfoundland and Labrador to the Yukon. This forest is home to countless species of birds, insects and mammals. It's a place of black spruce and tamarack, of mossy undergrowth and glacial lakes. In the spring and summer, it bursts into a riot of life. Warblers flit among branches, frogs call from wetlands, and wildflowers bloom between the ferns. Further north, the tundra takes over, stark, flat, and seemingly empty, yet teeming with life when you take a closer look. Lichen carpets the rocks in delicate fractal patterns. Tiny blooms, purple saxifrage, Arctic poppy, and mountain avens emerge during the brief summer, their colours bright against the muted earth. These plants grow low to the ground, hugging the warmth, their life cycles compressed into a few short weeks. On the west coast, temperate rainforests thrive. Towering Douglas fir, western red cedar, and Sitka spruce create a cathedral of green. Ferns blanket the forest floor, and everything seems wrapped in a gentle mist. The Haida Gwaii archipelago, rich in biodiversity and indigenous heritage, is a perfect example of how lush and vibrant this ecosystem can be. Here, the forest feels ancient, magical even, with nurse logs feeding new trees and moss draping branches like velvet. In the east, maple trees blaze with colour each autumn, crimson, gold and orange, lighting up the landscape like fire. Sugar maples are more than beautiful. They're a source of syrup, of course, but also a beloved symbol of the changing seasons. Their leaves crunch underfoot in October and return in soft green bud form in spring, anchoring Canadians in the rhythms of the year. On the prairies, tall grasses sway in the breeze, big blue stem, switchgrass and wild rye. These open spaces may look simple, but they support a surprisingly rich ecosystem of insects, birds, and small mammals. Prairie crocus, the provincial flower of Manitoba, is one of the first signs of spring, often pushing through the last snowdrifts with fuzzy purple petals that look like they've just woken up. Even the smallest plants carry weight. Arctic lichen, slow growing and resilient, thrives on rocks where almost nothing else can. It's a vital food source for caribou and a symbol of endurance. In forests and parks, you'll find symbolic trees and plants. White pine, often associated with peace. Cedar, used in traditional Indigenous medicine and rituals. And wheat, golden and waving in the breeze, representing the vast fields of the prairie provinces. Canada's relationship with its flora and fauna is one of deep respect. In Indigenous traditions, animals and plants are not seen as separate from humans, but as part of a vast and interconnected family. Each creature has its role, each tree its purpose. These beliefs continue to influence how conservation efforts are approached, how land is honoured, and how stories are told. Even in cities, the natural world is never far away. Raccoons navigate urban alleys with stealth and attitude. Squirrels chase each other through public parks. Monarch butterflies flutter past bus stops in September. Nature finds a way to weave into the daily rhythms of life, whether you're deep in the Rockies or sipping coffee on a downtown balcony. This land is alive, not just with movement, but with meaning. The call of a loon over a still lake, the flash of antlers in the trees, the whisper of wind through prairie grass. Each is a reminder that in Canada, the wild is not something distant or exotic. It's part of the fabric of home. It's the heartbeat beneath the snow, the rustle behind the cedar trees, the reason you stop walking, hold your breath, and feel a little smaller and a little more whole just for a moment. Canada wears modernity like a well-layered outfit, practical, weather-appropriate, and just a little bit stylish without trying too hard. Beneath its rugged wilderness and timeless traditions lies a vibrant, ever-evolving urban rhythm. Cities rise like stitched patches across a vast landscape, each with its own personality, quirks, and heartbeat. Together, they form a modern tapestry that's equal parts innovation, routine, and cosy coffee-scented corners. Toronto, Canada's largest city, stands tall on the edge of Lake Ontario, its skyline marked by the needle-like elegance of the CN Tower. Skyscrapers made of glass and ambition stretch toward the clouds, casting reflections onto bustling sidewalks below. This city is a swirl of languages, streetcars, art galleries, and corner shops selling samosas next to sushi rolls, next to Jamaican patties. You can walk down a single street and pass a dozen different cultures, each folded into the city's identity like pages in a shared novel. Despite its size and energy, Toronto also knows how to pause. In winter, people huddle into down jackets and walk briskly from cafe to subway. In summer, parks bloom with picnickers and street musicians. Kensington Market hums with vintage stores and second-hand bookstores. Queen Street pulses with fashion and indie coffee houses. You'll see business people and street artists, poets and engineers, all sharing the same public benches, just at slightly different speeds. Out west, Vancouver offers a gentler kind of urban life. Tucked between ocean and mountains, it's a city where glass towers reflect snow-capped peaks and joggers pass yoga studios on their way to farmers markets. It rains a lot, but the locals don't mind. Umbrellas become part of the daily uniform, and there's something soothing about the sound of water tapping gently against windows as people sip chai in leafy cafes. In Vancouver, nature isn't just close, it's part of the architecture. Trees line nearly every block. Beaches sit just minutes from the downtown core. On clear days, you can stand in the heart of the city and see both sailboats bobbing in the harbour and hikers winding their way up nearby trails. It's a city that's learned to move at a thoughtful pace, where eco-consciousness meets coffee shop culture and high-rise living meets deep-rooted respect for the land. Other cities add their own colours to the tapestry. Montreal, with its mix of French elegance and punk rock attitude, hosts world-renowned festivals and tiny basement poetry readings, sometimes on the same block. Calgary blends cowboy boots with corporate towers, where rodeo culture and oil meetings coexist with a surprising amount of public art. Halifax wraps maritime charm around you like a sea-warmed quilt, and Winnipeg surprises you with its quiet depth, creative heartbeat, and open sky. Public life in Canada thrives in small, everyday moments. Libraries serve not just as book lenders, but as shelters from the cold, gathering places, study halls, and hubs of curiosity. Many stay open late, their windows glowing warmly against the snow outside. Inside, people sit quietly with headphones, read with steaming mugs nearby, or chat softly with librarians who seem to know exactly which shelf holds the answer to any question. Markets are another kind of urban heartbeat. The St. Lawrence Market in Toronto, Granville Island Market in Vancouver, Marché Jean Talon in Montreal. Each is a feast of sights, sounds and smells. There's something deeply satisfying about picking out a loaf of bread still warm from the oven, selecting apples from a local orchard, or asking the fishmonger how fresh the salmon is. Spoiler, very fresh. Markets are where conversations linger, where strangers exchange cooking tips, and where neighbourhoods feel like neighbourhoods. Even in winter, public life doesn't disappear. It just gets bundled up. Benches are dusted with snow but still used. Ice rinks open in parks, surrounded by food stalls selling hot cider and grilled sausages. Outdoor art remains uncovered, frost adding a new layer of texture. Snow becomes part of the decor, muffling sound and turning even the busiest intersections into gentle, dreamlike scenes. People nod at each other more often, a kind of silent winter solidarity. We're all out here. We've got this. In modern Canada, connection isn't just face-to-face, it's digital too. Social media pulses, with photos of auroras dancing over the tundra, pancakes drowned in maple syrup, protest signs crafted by clever teenagers, and grandparents holding up signs during Zoom calls. TikTok videos of people skating to work or explaining how to survive minus 30 degrees Celsius with grace and humour make the rounds, earning likes from coast to coast. Young voices are shaping the conversation in real time, whether through podcasts, indie films, or handmade zines sold at pop-up markets. There's a strong current of youth-led storytelling. These voices explore identity, climate change, reconciliation, and community with clarity and care. They're not waiting to be heard. They're already speaking, organising, and inviting others into the dialogue. Art and activism go hand in hand. One moment you're watching a funny Instagram reel about snow pants, and the next you're reading a thoughtful thread on land acknowledgements. Film and television have carved out their own distinct identity. Shows like Schitt's Creek, which charmed viewers around the globe with its gentle humour and big heart, were born in Canadian studios and small-town filming locations. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver often double as other places on screen, earning their nicknames as Hollywood North. But increasingly, Canadian stories are being told on their own terms, rooted in place, accent, and authenticity. Even in the fast-moving digital age, quiet rituals endure. A morning coffee from the corner cafe, sometimes in a reusable travel mug with mittens wrapped around it. A walk through the park, snow crunching underfoot, or blossoms falling in spring. A visit to the same bookstore every Saturday, browsing titles you may never buy, just to be near paper and possibility. A phone call to a loved one before dinner. A shared laugh over something the dog did. The rhythm of the season still sets the tempo. In autumn, coats appear almost overnight. Scarves are pulled from drawers, and leaves pile up on sidewalks in gold and crimson. Pumpkin patches and cider donuts become weekend staples. Winter brings its own choreography, layering, shoveling, scraping windshields, and cheering when the temperature climbs above freezing. Spring arrives shyly, almost apologetically, with puddles and robins, and the first brave crocuses poking through slush. In summer, city parks become patchwork quilts of picnic blankets, dogs, kites, and books. Ice cream trucks reappear. Music floats out of open windows. And somewhere, always, there's someone jumping into a cold lake with a yelp and a laugh. This modern Canada is not static. It moves, flows, and evolves with its people. It embraces newcomers, re-examines its past, and looks for new ways to grow together. It holds space for both tradition and transformation. You'll find Indigenous elders sharing stories through TikTok, grandmothers learning smartphone photography, and teenagers organising climate marches with handmade signs and snow boots. And through it all, daily life unfolds, not with fanfare, but with care. Someone opens the bakery early so the bread is ready before sunrise. Someone clears the sidewalk with a snowblower and waves at the neighbour across the street. Someone sends a good morning text with a weather warning and a reminder to wear warm socks. These moments aren't broadcast, they're just lived. In cafes with fogged up windows, in dog parks with snowballs flying, in grocery lines where people apologise for having too many items. There's a quiet, steady warmth that weaves through it all. It's the warmth of a country that, even at its coldest, finds ways to stay human, connected, and kind. A modern tapestry, stitched not only with skylines and fibre optics, but with laughter, layers, and the shared understanding that every season brings something worth holding on to. Canada isn't just one thing. It's not a single voice or a single face, not a neatly folded flag with one accent and one attitude. It's a home of many colours, sometimes quite literally, and every corner of it hums with its own rhythm. From the candy-coloured row houses of Newfoundland to the icy blues of Nunavut's tundra, the country offers not just variety, but contrast. Stark, beautiful, sometimes funny contrast that somehow fits together in a way that feels uniquely, unmistakably Canadian. Start in Newfoundland, and you'll be greeted by streets that look like they were painted by someone with a cheerful disregard for the colour wheel. In the capital of St. John's, the jellybean row houses are stacked against hillsides like rainbow blocks. Turquoise, cherry red, lemon yellow, seafoam green, they line up proudly, as if challenging the grey Atlantic skies to try and dampen their spirits. Legend has it, these houses were once painted brightly, so fishermen could find their way home through the fog. Whether or not that's true, it's certainly a story worth believing, because it fits the mood of the place, hardy, joyful, and slightly mischievous. Newfoundland's charm doesn't stop at its paint palette. The people here speak in an accent that sounds like it's been tossed back and forth across the Atlantic a few times. Part Irish lilt, part maritime rhythm, and entirely its own thing. Local expressions are both poetic and baffling. Someone might say it's blowing a gale when the wind kicks up, or refer to a chatty friend as being right crooked. Conversations are peppered with idioms you won't find in textbooks, and every story is told with a wink and a flourish. Jump across the map to the Yukon, and you'll find a completely different flavour. Here, the landscape stretches out like a canvas that forgot where the edges are. Endless forests, glacier-fed rivers, and mountains that rise suddenly, wearing snow like a casual accessory. Life here feels both slower and more intense. Winters are colder, nights are longer, and the stars seem close enough to count. But in the stillness, there's something deeply grounding. The communities in the Yukon are tight-knit and fiercely proud. Whitehorse, the territorial capital, blends frontier history with modern creativity. There's a surprising number of artists per capita, and the coffee shops are filled with more than just caffeine. There's live music, poetry readings, and plenty of deep discussions about the aurora borealis. The air smells like wood smoke and possibility. Head southeast and you land in Quebec, where the culture shifts again dramatically. This is where French is not just spoken, it's lived. But it's not quite Parisian French. Quebecois French has a music all its own, with regional accents, vivid slang, and an attitude that blends old world pride with North American spunk. Then there's Chiac, a dialect spoken mainly in Acadian communities in New Brunswick, which joyfully mixes French and English into a linguistic dance that often defies translation but never lacks personality. Quebec feels like stepping into another country entirely. You'll find boulangeries with flaky croissants that rival anything in Europe, summer festivals where accordions and electric guitars share the stage, and murals stretching 5 stories high on historic brick walls. Montreal bustles with art and irony, while Quebec City retains a fairy tale charm, complete with cobblestone streets and centuries-old cathedrals. The province has its own humour, politics, and even food. Hello, poutine with foie gras. Then there's Alberta. This is cowboy country, prairie proud and mountain tough. The cities of Calgary and Edmonton are known for their contrasts, corporate towers rising from cattle towns, high-end art galleries next to rodeo grounds, and a love for country music that's both ironic and completely sincere. Alberta's accent tilts toward the west, with a casual twang and a tendency to call you buddy, whether you're a stranger or a lifelong friend. Outside the cities, Alberta opens up into ranchland and wheat fields, eventually giving way to the towering Rockies. This is where you'll find Banff and Jasper, national parks that look like they were designed by a particularly enthusiastic postcard artist. Glacial lakes shimmer in impossible shades of turquoise. Elk wander across highways like they own the road, and in many ways they do. Move across the prairies, and you'll find landscapes that at first glance seem simple, even empty. But look again. In Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the skies stretch wide and generous, and the land itself is rich with grain, history, and quiet beauty. Prairie grasses sway like waves, and sunrises unfold in long, slow colour shows. This is where small towns thrive on community, where grain elevators mark the horizon like ancient sentinels, and where conversations happen on front porches over mugs of something warm. Coastal life, by contrast, lives in rhythm with the tides. In Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, fishing boats bob in sheltered harbours, and lighthouses stand watch on craggy bluffs. The sea air carries salt, gull cries, and the scent of something delicious frying in butter. Coastal communities tend to be chatty, generous, and steeped in tradition. Kitchen sealers, fiddle nights, and impromptu lobster boils on the beach. Out west again, the Pacific coast offers a completely different kind of calm. British Columbia's coastlines are lush, misty, and full of life. Rainforests cling to cliffs. Eagles perch like royalty. Inlets snake inland like secret pathways. The pace is slower, more meditative. In places like Tofino or Salt Spring Island, the daily rhythm includes both surf reports and farmers markets. Even in Vancouver, you can go from downtown to deep forest in less than half an hour. Urban life and wilderness are neighbours, and sometimes they borrow sugar from each other. Then there's Nunavut, remote, expansive, and home to communities that have thrived in the Arctic for thousands of years. The colours here are cooler. Icy blues, brilliant whites, soft greys. But the people and the traditions are deeply vibrant. Inuit culture, language, and knowledge continue to shape life in these northern communities. Inuktitut is spoken in homes, classrooms, and on public signage. The land is not just beautiful, it's instructive. It teaches patience, respect, and interdependence. Even the architecture changes depending on where you stand in the country. In the north, buildings are often raised off the ground to deal with permafrost. In coastal towns, They're painted in bold hues to stand out against fog and snow. In prairie towns, you'll find classic grain silos and functional barns standing proudly beside sleek new schools. In Toronto, glass towers stretch upward, while in small-town Quebec, wooden cottages cling to hillsides, stubborn and sweet. Language is another thread in this colourful weave. English and French, yes, but also Cree, Ojibwe, Inuktitut, Tagalog, Punjabi, Mandarin, Ukrainian, and more. Canada is a polyglot patchwork. It's not uncommon to hear 4 or 5 languages in a single subway car. Dialects shift from one region to the next, and slang travels differently in every province. What's a parkade in Alberta is a parking garage in Ontario. Ask for a double-double at a coffee shop, and you better mean a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars, or you might get some very confused looks. Some of the country's most stunning places are also its most underrated. The Gaspé Peninsula in eastern Quebec offers dramatic cliffs, ocean breezes, and winding roads that seem made for storytelling. Haida Gwaii, off the coast of British Columbia, is rich with Haida culture and rainforest beauty. A place where totem poles rise from mossy ground and eagles wheel in silent circles overhead. Alberta's Badlands, with their hoodoo rock formations and dinosaur fossils, look like another planet entirely. One that happens to serve really good prairie pie. What ties it all together isn't uniformity, it's contrast. It's the ability to hold many truths at once. A fisherman in Newfoundland and a graphic designer in Vancouver might live entirely different lives, but both know the satisfaction of a warm meal after a cold walk. A powwow dancer in Saskatchewan and a poet in Montreal may speak different languages, but they both honour story and rhythm. A snowplough driver in Thunder Bay and a puffin watcher in Newfoundland both understand that nature makes its own plans, and that it's best to respect them. In Canada, identity isn't a single note, it's a chorus. It's a blend of regions, traditions, languages, and landscapes, each singing their part. And while the melodies may differ, they always seem to harmonise in the end. From sea to sea to sea, this home of many colours offers something rare. The chance to be yourself, surrounded by people doing the same, all beneath the same sky. Even if that sky is painted in different shades of blue. Canada is a country with its eyes on the horizon, but its ears are still tuned to the echoes behind it. The stories of this place don't just live in textbooks or monuments. They live in the land, in the voices of elders, in the dreams of youth, and in the growing recognition that the past isn't something to escape, but something to understand. In recent years, conversations about reconciliation, cultural revival, and environmental stewardship have taken deeper root, pulling ancient wisdom into the framework of modern hopes. At the heart of many of these conversations is reconciliation with Indigenous communities, a word that goes beyond politics or policy and stretches into every corner of life. It means listening, learning, and most importantly, changing. For generations, Indigenous peoples in Canada were subject to colonial systems that sought to erase their languages, cultures, and identities. The legacy of residential schools, forced relocations, and systemic discrimination has left deep scars, but also deep strength. Today, reconciliation means facing that truth head-on. It means acknowledging that treaties were broken, that promises were not kept, and that healing must be built on honesty, not avoidance. It means supporting Indigenous-led initiatives in education, health, justice, and land stewardship. It means moving past symbolism into action, whether that's returning traditional lands to Indigenous governance or ensuring that water on reserves is safe to drink, not just promised to be. Museums across the country are playing a role in that shift, offering spaces where history can be explored with honesty and complexity. The Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, just across the river from Ottawa, holds one of the most important Indigenous collections in the world. Inside, you'll find towering totem poles, ceremonial regalia, and stories told from the perspective of the people who lived them. It's a place where the past isn't frozen in glass cases, but continues to speak, to teach, and to challenge. Further west, the Royal Ontario Museum, often just called the ROM, houses thousands of Indigenous artefacts and has worked to reframe how these objects are displayed and understood. Increasingly, museums are involving Indigenous curators, scholars, and community members in how collections are interpreted. The goal is no longer to showcase a culture from the outside, but to invite its voices into the centre of the conversation. But the resurgence of Indigenous culture isn't limited to curated exhibits. It's alive in schools where children are learning to introduce themselves in their ancestral languages. It's in community radio stations broadcasting in Cree, Mohawk, and Inuktitut. It's in art, music, film, and literature that centre Indigenous experiences not as historical footnotes, but as present-day power. Language revitalisation is one of the most remarkable aspects of this resurgence. For many communities, bringing back language means more than just words. It means reconnecting to worldview, to ceremony, to family. When a young person learns to say "I love you" in their traditional language for the first time, it's not just a phrase, it's a thread being rewoven into a tapestry that was torn. Programs across Canada are helping this revitalisation flourish. Immersion schools, mentorships between elders and youth, and digital apps are making it easier to learn languages once nearly lost. Languages like Nehiawowin, Cree, Dane, Michif, and Kwakwala are rising again, not as relics, but as tools for living. Even urban centres are seeing growth in language courses and cultural events that support Indigenous identity and pride. The concept of land back is also becoming part of the broader dialogue. It's not a metaphor. It's about actual land, returning stewardship, ownership, and access to Indigenous peoples whose territories were taken without consent. In many cases, land back doesn't mean kicking people out or shutting down public access. It means shifting decision-making, honouring treaties, and recognising that traditional ecological knowledge has kept these lands thriving for thousands of years. In British Columbia, co-managed conservation efforts between Indigenous nations and government agencies have shown that protecting biodiversity and cultural heritage can go hand in hand. In Ontario, the return of sacred sites like Ipperwash Provincial Park to Indigenous control has created opportunities for community-led restoration and education. These aren't just legal gestures, they're spiritual, ecological, and cultural realignments. Youth are at the forefront of these movements. From remote communities to downtown campuses, young people are organising, speaking out, and redefining what leadership looks like. They're holding governments accountable, demanding action on climate change, and challenging outdated narratives. Some of them stand on the front lines of land defence movements. Others publish zines, run workshops, or create digital art that blends tradition and modernity. Many are bridging the gap between their ancestors' teachings and today's technologies. You'll find Indigenous coders developing language apps, students designing solar-powered housing for reserves, and young leaders launching campaigns to decolonise education curriculums. These aren't isolated efforts. They're part of a broader shift toward self-determination, one that's powered by both memory and imagination. Environmental innovation is another space where the future is being shaped with ancient guidance. Indigenous knowledge systems have always emphasised balance, sustainability, and respect for natural cycles, concepts that the modern world is only beginning to grasp with urgency. Whether it's fire management practices, rotational harvesting, or sacred laws about water, these teachings offer blueprints for survival in a warming world. Across Canada, Indigenous-led conservation projects are expanding. The Decho First Nations in the Northwest Territories have helped establish protected areas larger than some countries. In British Columbia, coastal nations are restoring salmon streams and monitoring marine health with traditional methods and cutting-edge science. These are not two separate systems. They're complementary ways of seeing, understanding, and caring for the world. But dreaming about the future isn't just about fixing problems. It's also about creating joy. Cultural festivals, powwows, and art shows are thriving. Indigenous fashion is on the rise, with designers blending beadwork, leather, and digital printing into clothing that walks runways in Toronto and Paris alike. Filmmakers are telling stories that range from the fantastical to the deeply personal. Indigenous sci-fi and futurism, known as Indigifuturism, is carving out new narrative space, imagining futures where culture is not lost, but flourishing in ways that were once unimaginable. And amid all this, Canadians from all walks of life are rethinking what it means to belong, to listen, to grow. More schools are beginning each day with land acknowledgements, not as hollow gestures, but as starting points. More cities are hosting truth and reconciliation events, not just annually, but woven into daily community life. More non-Indigenous people are learning how to be better allies, not by speaking for others, but by making space and listening well. At its best, Canada is learning to look both backward and forward at the same time, to walk with humility beside those who have carried stories, land, and languages through generations of hardship, to build bridges with stone and cedar and laughter, to imagine cities where Indigenous art adorns skyscrapers, and where rivers are treated not as resources but as relatives. The road to reconciliation is long. It's uneven and sometimes uncomfortable, but it is also paved with possibility. The future will not be a copy of the past, but it will be better if the past is acknowledged, honoured, and invited into the present. A country built on stolen land can still become a place of shared respect. A society shaped by silencing can learn to listen. In this future, museums will be living spaces. Schools will teach not just history, but truth. Rivers will run clean, languages will thrive, and stories will be told not in translation, but in the tongues they were born in. And young people will keep dreaming of balance, of justice, of joy. Canada's dreams for tomorrow are not made of glass towers or glittering tech alone. They are shaped in sweat lodges and classrooms, in longhouse meetings and late-night editing sessions. They are shaped by the voices of elders and the footsteps of children. And perhaps most of all, they are shaped by the growing understanding that ancient wisdom doesn't sit in the past. It walks forward side by side with the future. The snow falls gently now, quiet as breath. Outside the window, the world has been blanketed in stillness, as if the land itself is ready to sleep. It's the kind of hush that settles in just before dawn, or just after twilight. When the wind softens, the trees stand tall and watchful, and the sky begins to dim into deep velvet blue. Inside a cabin somewhere, perhaps nestled near a frozen lake, or tucked at the edge of a spruce forest, there's a glow from the hearth, the scent of pine smoke, and the gentle weight of a blanket pulled just a little closer. We've wandered a long way together across this great northern land. From sea to shining sea to frozen sea, we've explored forests thick with cedar and spruce, tundras that bloom in defiance of the cold, and prairies that stretch out like whispered dreams under enormous skies. We've followed the tracks of moose and wolves, paused to admire the plumage of puffins and the icy grace of snowy owls, and marvelled at the steady determination of beavers reshaping rivers with little more than teeth and instinct. We've tasted traditions in every bite, from the savoury richness of tourtière to the sweet simplicity of butter tarts, from wild berries gathered in northern forests to the golden cascade of maple syrup, warming a plate of morning pancakes, meals shared around wood tables, under picnic umbrellas, at powwows and in downtown cafes, all offering not just nourishment, but welcome. Every dish a reflection of place and people, memory and motion. Along our journey, we've heard songs that rise from every corner of the land, Inuit throats singing that echoes like wind through bone, fiddles that fill kitchen parties in Cape Breton with rhythm and laughter. Quebecois folk tunes that dance on cobblestone streets. We felt the low hum of Leonard Cohen's voice, the soaring sweetness of Joni Mitchell, the energy of Drake, the sincerity of campfire ballads sung off-key but from the heart. We've wandered through cities with skylines of glass and rain-soaked sidewalks, and through villages where a single curling rink or community centre is the heartbeat of daily life. We've peeked into libraries lit by low lamps, felt the hush of a bookstore in winter, and caught snippets of conversations in dozens of languages, each one a thread in the colourful weave of modern Canadian identity. We've lingered at festivals where fireworks reflect off frozen lakes, where small-town parades wind slowly past cheering crowds wrapped in scarves and mittens, where powwows pulse with drumbeats and bright regalia, and harvest celebrations invite neighbours to gather, to share, and to give thanks under golden leaves and pumpkin-orange skies. We've spoken with artists whose brushes, beads and chisels carry the knowledge of generations. We've listened to storytellers, from elders in northern communities to teenagers reshaping history through spoken word and film. We've watched cultures return, revitalise, and reclaim space, not with volume, but with grace, clarity, and quiet strength. We've walked among totems and towers, cathedrals and cabins. We've crossed bridges built of stone, and others made of understanding. And we've paused at the places where memory rests heavy. The stories not always easy to carry, but necessary to hold. The work of truth, of reconciliation, of healing, is long and winding, but it is work Canada is learning to do, with humility and with hope. And now, as we reach the end of our gentle journey, imagine that log cabin once more. The fire has been stoked, a cup of something warm, maybe tea or cocoa, or that uniquely Canadian ritual of hot water with a twist of lemon and maple syrup, rests beside you. The cup is warm in your hands. Outside, snowflakes swirl in the quiet dance of night. A loon calls faintly from the lake, its voice echoing across the frozen water like a lullaby from another world. The wood of the cabin smells like pine and old stories. The floorboards creak softly as someone settles in across the room, pulling on wool socks and smiling at the wind pressing gently against the windows. It's peaceful here, the kind of peace you don't have to explain, the kind that sinks into your bones and slows your heartbeat until even your thoughts seem to move more slowly, more softly. Somewhere not far away, another cabin glows with the same warmth. Another fire crackles. Another person sips their drink, thinks about the day, and lets go of the cold. Across this enormous country, in apartments and houses, in tents and chalets, on boats and under stars, people are doing the same, finding quiet, seeking stillness, and giving themselves permission to rest. It's easy to think of Canada as a place of extremes, of cold winters and long roads, of mountains and moose, of history and hope. But it's also a place of softness, of gentle moments, of small joys, a place where you can watch snow fall from the inside of a bus window and feel inexplicably comforted, a place where strangers hold doors, where laughter erupts over steaming bowls of soup, where a single loon call can make you pause mid-step just to listen. So thank you for wandering with us through this landscape of forests and flavours, of faces and festivals, of stories and silence. Thank you for travelling gently, for listening deeply, for letting Canada unfold at its own quiet pace. As we drift towards sleep, let the night wrap around you like a soft flannel quilt. Let the images linger. A lantern glowing in the snow, a pine bough dusted with frost, the curve of a frozen lake under stars. Let the sounds fade, the crackle of firewood, the sigh of a settling log, the distant lullaby of a northern wind. And let the words fall away like fresh snow covering tracks, leaving only calm. And so, with the final embers of the fire glowing low and the snow still drifting gently outside, we come to the end of our slow and thoughtful journey across Canada. A land stitched together not just by borders or maps, but by people, places, and quiet wonders. This has been more than a tour. It's been a gentle unfolding of a place that reveals itself in layers. In the calm breath of boreal forests, in the laughter echoing from winter carnivals, in the delicate resilience of wildflowers blooming from Arctic stone. Canada is often described in terms of size, its sprawling distance from coast to coast to coast, its vast open skies, its deep wilderness. But those who call it home know that its greatest measure is in its softness, its subtlety, its endless capacity to surprise without shouting. There's a serenity here that doesn't need to be explained. It's found in the stillness of frozen lakes, in the hush of snowfall blanketing small towns, in the unspoken camaraderie between strangers standing in line for coffee on a snowy morning. It's in the rhythm of life lived close to the land, where people rise early, carry on in all weather, and greet one another with quiet warmth. It's a country where nature isn't something to escape, but something to dwell in, to learn from, to walk beside. Yet alongside this serenity is a powerful resilience. The resilience of Indigenous communities who are revitalising their languages, reclaiming their traditions, and leading the way forward with wisdom older than the hills. the resilience of newcomers carving out new lives in unfamiliar climates and cultures, the resilience of small towns that weather storms, literal and figurative, with a shrug, a joke, and a snow shovel. This resilience isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet and constant. It's in the child learning Inuktitut at school for the first time, the grandmother knitting mittens by the fireplace, the teenager planting trees all summer in the northern woods, the artist carving a story into cedar, the neighbour offering a lift because they saw you trudging through the snow with groceries. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving with kindness, care, and connection. What makes Canada truly remarkable, however, is its diversity. Not just the diversity of landscape, though that alone would be enough to marvel at. From the red cliffs of Prince Edward Island to the blue-green fjords of British Columbia, from the wind-swept tundra of Nunavut to the gentle wheat waves of Saskatchewan, the land itself is a geography of contrasts and wonder. But it's the diversity of its people that gives the land its heart. Dozens of languages spoken in city parks, festivals that blend cultures with rhythm and colour, food that reflects histories of migration and mingling. Canada doesn't flatten its many voices into one. It lets them sing in harmony, occasionally off-key, often improvisational, but always together. It's a place that offers space, not just physical, but emotional, cultural, spiritual, a place where many ways of being can coexist. And in all this variety, there is an invitation to stay curious, to keep learning, to see the beauty not just in the grandeur of mountains or cathedrals, but in the small, humble things. The pattern of frost on a window pane, the laughter of kids on a sledding hill, the gentle nod exchanged on a snowy sidewalk. Every place has a story, every person, a thread in this growing, breathing tapestry. Let this journey remind us that peace isn't always loud or triumphant. Sometimes it's a quiet moment by a wood stove, a shared joke over pancakes, the hush of a book being opened in a cosy corner. Rest doesn't require isolation or silence. It only asks that we slow down enough to notice what's already here. And connection isn't about grand gestures. It's about pausing, listening, making space. For others, for ourselves, for the land beneath our feet. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps imagine a moonlit snowfall. The world outside your window is still and glowing. Each snowflake falls like a whispered wish, silent and sure. The trees stand dusted and dignified. A fox moves through the forest, leaving paw prints that will vanish by morning. Above, the northern sky shimmers faintly, stars tucked into their snowy quilt, the moon keeping watch over all. And within the warmth of your room, within the folds of this soft, wandering tale, you are safe, you are still, and you are home. Thank you, truly, for coming along on this journey across Canada, for walking gently beside her forests and streets and rivers. Thank you for your openness, your imagination, your willingness to let the rhythm slow. It's been a joy to share these stories with you. And before we close our eyes for the night, I'd love to ask, where are you listening from? What time is it in your part of the world? Did this quiet adventure help ease your evening just a little bit? If you found peace in this journey, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. It helps this sleepy little corner grow and lets others find their way to gentle explorations like this one. But whether you do or don't, whether you're in a city lit by towers or a cabin wrapped in snow, know this: the stars are out, The snow is falling, and somewhere not far away, another story waits for you. Good night from Canada.